Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Board of Selectmen meetings for Monday, September 12th, 2016. Selectman Nichols, would you lead us in the pledge of the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks very much. So we do have a quorum, but a shorter board than normal. Both are traveling. We may see a selectman car later in the meeting. We've got all sorts of challenges today. Okay, on the agenda for tonight, 6:30, organization, pledge of allegiance, read mail. 6:35, 3 items under joint meetings with town boards. First one is a fiscal update. Second one is a library building project. Third one is potential articles for November 16th, 2016 special town meeting. 7:15, joint meeting to fill a vacancy on the Park and Recreation Commission. 7:30, input updates, public members, and a new item that we've inserted here as a regular item, which is selectmen goal updates. If we have time, we have a jam-packed agenda. 7:45, Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizza of Littleton, all alcohol restaurant license change. 8 o'clock, medical marijuana cultivation site application. 8:30, 4 items under town administrator, selectmen's meeting schedule, accept donations on estate of Eleanor Cooper, finance and administration, succession, reorg plan, and confirmatory deed on 21 Laurel Road. Finally, closing out at 9 o'clock, hopefully, with other business minutes approval. All right, so let's start off with mail.
First item we had was actually an update from the Castle in the Trees that we had in our packet, and we've got the folks here to tell us about their rebuild program.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello, welcome.
Hi there. This is Sarah Donovan. I'm Christy Bates. We're the general coordinators for the Castle in the Trees rebuild, and thank you for allowing us to come here for a quick update. I know you're busy tonight. We just want to say that the old playground has been torn down, and now all of 300 King Street is closed. It's closed until September 27th. There are barriers at the entrance of the parking lot, and we hope that people respect that and know that Aiden's Playground is closed too, and all of 300 King Street is closed. And tree work and the grading is going to occur this week. We have storage trailers in the parking lot now. All the materials for the new playground have been ordered and are going to be delivered this week. A huge thanks to Bill Cole and Bob Romley from PMBC for helping us coordinate that. And we still need lots of volunteers. The build is the 21st to the 25th. We need lots of volunteers to help build the playground. It's being built with all volunteer labor. So we encourage people to sign up and help.
Again, the dates are Wednesday, September 21st through Sunday, September 25th. All volunteers must be 18 years and older. We do have 3 shifts a day. They're 4-hour shifts. So, and if you can only come for an hour or 2, we're not going to turn anyone away. We need all the help we can get. All volunteers will get a t-shirt. We have snacks. We have meals for volunteers. We have free childcare. So really, there's no excuse not to come out and help with this amazing project for the town. We also need people to help loan tools. We're looking for wheelbarrows, rakes, things like that. And we're also asking people to donate baked goods and drinks for the volunteers. And all of the information and the links for the sign-ups are on our website, www.castleinthetrees.org.
Fantastic.
So, any questions?
So the shifts, there's 3 shifts.
Yes.
And it's until 9:30 at night, is it? 9 o'clock, so 5:30 to 9 is the last shift, so.
Yes.
Some of us are unable to make it during the day, but likely I'm gonna be there one of those evening shifts just because it's the only time I can fit it into my schedule.
Yes.
Absolutely. And if you can't come until 5:45, that's okay. Don't stay away because of that. Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
If we lend tools, should we put our names on them and then?
We have a whole tools tracking.
Okay.
So.
But yes, you can label it if you want, but it'll be labeled
Great.
again when it gets.
Okay.
Fantastic. You guys have
Thank
done a
you.
great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Signing up is
Great.
All right, next up.
Next up is an update that we received from the Master Plan Update Committee that the charrette, the planning exercise for Littleton Common, has been rescheduled to September 30, Friday, September 30, and Saturday, October 1st. Voila. Very good.
Thank you, Anna.
And last item in the packet, we had received a letter from the MSP, Mass State Police Wives, looking for permission to put blue ribbons up at the town offices, Littleton Common and Police Department in support of all law enforcement.
So do we want to make any comments about
I was
that
wondering.
particular?
Yes.
There's been some press about that, about some other communities that have put up the blue ribbons in support of law enforcement. MSP Wives is an organization that is independent of the Mass State Police. It's some Mass State Police troopers' wives and former state troopers' wives who have formed a group, a support group for any state troopers or siblings that are, or spouses that are going through any tough times. And they saw an opportunity to put out some blue ribbons, just like we've done gold ribbons or purple ribbons or pink ribbons in the past. In speaking with some state trooper friends, some of them feel as though this is a good thing, some of them are kind of agnostic toward it. So I think we need to have some conversations with our,
I've had the same kind of
Staff.
feedback initially, but it was like, oh, it's obvious they want support, we'll give them support. But then, I guess it's not universal in the police community that this is the kind of drawing of lines they want to encourage, so I'd look for a little more input before we made a decision on it.
I agree.
So we can take it under advisement, we'll get further input from the
Chief.
The chief is back from vacation, and we'll have a full board.
Looks well rested.
Okay, that sounds
Is
good.
that further that way?
All right, moving right along. First item up under joint meetings with town boards. So first item is more of a foundational fiscal overview conversation. And basically, we've got here a couple of different aspects of this, and I'll let Bonnie and Steve take us through it. But it's some work done to help us understand our situation and some options to move forward.
Basically, the last time that we came to you with an update on debt service, and both in our existing debt service and our future, was in relation to the fire station project. It was asked, when could the fire station debt be fit inside the levy limit by declining debt service. Since then, we have had some other projects that have come up. The library is one under discussion, Alumni Field. We know that Shaker Lane had been kind of put out there a number of years ago by the school department as something that needed to be looked at in the future. So we know that there are some other projects that are in the planning, various phases of planning at this point. So we wanted to look at all of the debt, and we also wanted to change the look that we did previous, and that we need to show you what the impact to capital is. There is an impact to capital with whatever we do with debt service, because it's the same kind of pot of money that we use to finance our capital projects. And we also wanted to broaden the scope, not just to what we know is in the planning phases, but over the full 20-plus year impact that we'd be placing this debt. Previous to that, we showed you a 10-year model, which is typically what we do with any of our financial modeling. But where we know that the debt is going to be issued over a 20-plus year period, particularly for the fire station, we wanted to show the impact to that. Once we did that, we realized with the other projects and with the 20-year look out, we came up to a problem after the 10 years, in that it was a direct impact to the capital spending. At a time where our buildings are declining and we need to spend capital money to maintain them. And that's with the assumptions that we currently have, which arguably are underfunded with capital. We know that the study that recommended the facility needs averaged about $1 million a year, and we're spending about half of that at this point, and other issues. So we just wanted to take more of a holistic approach in looking at debt. We didn't want to come to you with just, here's a problem we came up with. We prefer to bring you a potential solution to it. So we looked at, well, how can we manage this going out over the 20 years if we need to do these projects? And we want to stabilize the tax impact to the residents. We need to come up with a plan that would work, that could be sustainable. So Steve Venuti is the wizard with financial, management with debt. in his previous life in banking and finance committee, brings a wealth of experience that I am eternally grateful for. But he did the bulk of the work on these charts, so I look to you to indulge us in going through them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening. So we're going to start off basically at a chart that you've seen before. It should be familiar. This is the original chart that was presented to you. And it showed the current debt service. It was the excluded debt in the green and the inside levy debt, which is in the red. Okay. Bonnie was then asked by the board, what year can we fit the fire station in and keep the debt service, total debt service, below this FY14 level? And I believe it was called the threshold for pain, is what it was. So we'll put an $8.9 million fire station for a bond in FY21. We start short-term borrowing 3 years before in 18. And you can see that when we do bond the project, it was under the FY14 threshold for pain. So that's when we started to peg the timeline for the fire station, work backwards from that point in time, how we needed to proceed. When you look at this graph and you say that we're going to compare it to this FY14 level, we're really comparing apples to oranges here. Because this debt, this excluded debt service goes away. We don't raise it the next year. This debt service, the inside debt, as it goes down, rolls into the capital plan. And we've been doing that for a number of years. So if we're going to say that the fire station or any of the projects that we're going to do is going to be inside the levy, then we need to get rid of the green piece, the excluded debt. If we say it's going to be outside the levy, then we have to take away the red piece, the inside levy, and just look at those things that are similar. So we're comparing apples to apples. So in this case, let's assume that the fire station is going to be inside the levy. So we'll take away the existing excluded debt. Now let's take away the fire station for a second so we can lay some groundwork. So this is the inside debt service. It goes away in FY23, as you can see. And it's been decreasing for years. And the other component of this that we use when we look at these funds, basically, is our capital spending. So as the red rolls off, it's available for our capital spending. And you can see the different levels of capital spending that we've done. And this is all inside the levy. And one of the things that we want to look at is right here in these numbers here. So we're looking at basically $3.3 million per year that's available between debt service and capital. We've kept these funds segregated from the operating budget. The two don't mix. We're not funding the capital plan through the operating budget, and none of the capital dollars leak into the operating budget. So this is standalone money. You can see that the level of capital spending is going up and down here, depending on in these future years, what's sitting in the budget forecast that we have. So the other component that we started a couple of years ago was our capital stabilization fund. And you can see when I bring the capital stabilization fund, all these numbers are level. That's the $3.3 million that we're dealing with. So as this goes down and we meet our capital spending, there's more available to add into the capital stabilization.
And because this is inside the levy, basically FY17 is now the baseline. That's being supported within the levy right now. So there's really no reason to go back and look at FY14. So let's just get rid of those years. Just to clean up the chart just a bit. As you can see, so it's all level. Now let's look at our capital spending. Our capital spending going through those years is about $2 million, $2.2 million for the 10 years. Okay, so 2.2. In this top section, capital stabilization, we currently have $2.9 million in capital stabilization. It grows with these additions each year. And you can see by FY26, capital stabilization, with no projects being funded, gets up to $11.7 million. Okay? As we fund projects inside the levy, what's going to happen? Debt service goes up, capital spending hopefully stays to the same levels, and what would happen, it would be funded out of this capital stabilization fund. So let's go back and add the fire station. So you can see that capital stabilization goes from 11 million down to 6 million by FY26. Our capital spending is staying the same at the $2.2 million for that 10-year average, and we're still dealing with the same $3.3 million across these levels. So our debt service has gone up with the addition to the fire station. We're able to maintain this level, and all it is withdrawals from stabilization. Okay? We're talking about Alumni Field at $2.3 million. Same type of reasoning here. Instead of, I know the original thought process was to take it out of capital stabilization. This model goes in and short-term borrows that over a 6-year period. So we're doing bands and rolling them over year over year. And short-term borrowing is pretty low right now. We can't bond that project because if associated with any other bond, it would be a 20-year bond. Even though we could issue that debt service for 10, we wouldn't be able to touch that field for 20 years. So we don't want to do that. So we'd issue 1-year notes. The library, and this is using the numbers that came from the numbers that the trustees presented at a past meeting, the slope site at $15.5 million. Non-reimbursable costs of furniture, fixtures, and the contingency dollars brings it to 13.2. State match is 50%, roughly. That's 6.6 million. So the net to the town will be 8.888. So we'll build a $8.9 million library.
That's an estimate.
And we're looking at trying to fit that in with bonding in FY24. If we push it in any closer to that, we can see that our capital stabilization goes down, and it would suffer a lot more than this if it's pushed into these earlier years. We still haven't touched capital. Capital is still at that 2.2. So all we've done right now is funded 2 projects out of our capital stabilization plan. 2 years after the library, we figure we would need to do something with this building. And just to have a number in there, well, not 15. $1.5 million, say, to renovate this building. We know the life cycle of Alumni Field is somewhere between 10 and 12 years, so we pegged this at 12 years to do a second Alumni Field, basically. So we'll do $2 million project there. We won't be doing bleachers, but the cost of the field may go up. Just to put a number in there, we'll put $2 million. So we funded all these projects right now out of capital stabilization. Our capital stabilization plan goes down to $73,000. We're still funding capital at that $2.2 million level for the 10 years. So right now, this looks like it works. When you expand it, however, and you start looking at the debt service moving forward and our capital plan moving forward, what we're going to see is that capital stabilization never recovers. We're not able to put anything in there past FY '26. Our capital plan, starting in FY '27, we'd only be able to start funding it at 1.6 million, and it goes down from there. Just around this time, when we are running short of capital funds, we're also coming across a 25-year-old high school, a 20-year-old middle school, an 18-year-old police station. So it's just about the time where we're going to have to start putting more dollars invested into those buildings to maintain them. We're running low on our capital plan. And we can see this if I expand this chart to future years. This will be all the debt service, and you see we finished making withdrawals out of capital stabilization right there. There's the last $73,000 going out. And there's nothing else coming out of capital stabilization. There's only a couple of ways to recover from this shortfall here. If we needed to fund capital, operating budget, so transferring funds from the operating budget in, starting to borrow for equipment like we did years ago, where we had annual borrowing articles. All that does is increase the debt service year to year. So that's just kind of making more of a mess here, because now you're taking more money out of the operating budget than you needed to. The operating budget's going to be under pressure. We know that. These funds, like I said up front, these funds are basically segregated from the operating budget. Now, if we start moving operating budget money in here to fund this, and that pressure on the operating budget, hate to use the override word, but there's a potential for an operational override to fund those shortfalls. An alternative that we looked at is debt exclusions. The Finance Committee at their last meeting recommended that the town fund projects as debt exclusions. So let's take a look at those scenarios. This is where we are currently with our exclusion debt. It's a decreasing number, goes back to the taxpayer, so it's not raised in the current year, in the following year. In FY '17, that number is $1.8 million. And it goes down and leaves us in FY '31 as the final year, with nothing coming on in FY '32. These projects are, it's the police station, the middle school, Russell Street, Morrison property, and maybe one other land purchase that's in there at some point. So now how do we fund some of these projects? Well, let's go through and put the exact same numbers in. I'll put them here so I could cheat. I thought I did. right?
Annual entry.
Manual entry. So we just funded everything as a debt exclusion. And you can see here's now the debt service. This is all the excluded debt going out to FY '35. So all we've done right now is just put this entire burden onto the taxpayer. And these numbers, as you can see, so here's the excluded debt. Go up $3 million here. You can see $3,033,000, $3,089,000. So they become pretty big numbers. Maxing out on FY '24 is the biggest piece. Our capital stabilization fund in this scenario still is the same. There's our $11 million in FY '26 that we first saw in the first graph, and it continues to grow by FY '45 up to 36. Our capital plan is staying the same, so we're fully funding that number. And if we go out and we can expand that, you say we're still doing all the capital that we need to do that's in the budget. Any shortfalls, we have plenty of money right here to start covering shortfalls in capital. However, the taxpayer is right now taking a big crunch. So the problem is, how do we limit the exposure to the taxpayer, maintain our capital plan, and fund all these projects? We put $2.5 million into capital stabilization this year. The first thing that we would propose doing is taking that out and transferring it over to a debt exclusion stabilization account. So what we've done, so we've just decreased the money going into capital stabilization by $2.5 million, and now we've put it to a debt exclusion stabilization. We saw in that first graph from inside the levy, that kind of pink shading that showed the contributions to our capital stabilization fund. Varied from year to year depending on what the capital needs were, but there was money going in. What we would propose doing is only keeping 20% of that money in capital stabilization and moving 80% of it over to our debt exclusion stabilization. Still, money being built up in our capital stabilization fund is still $1.5 million to $2.5 million in those critical years where we may need some extra dollars. We're still spending down here, we're still spending to the $2,033,000 level in capital that's projected year to year. Now our debt exclusion stabilization fund has grown because now we're putting 80% of the revenue stream into that fund. Now, how do we use that fund to limit what the taxpayer is going to pay? We come down here in this section. If we say we don't want the taxpayer to pay any more than they're paying in FY17, we'll max that out at that $1.8 million. And don't forget, that number is the middle school, Russell Street Police Station. That's all that's in that $1.8 million right now. So right now, all we said was we're gonna max that exclusion debt out at that 1.8 million, which is the FY17 level. It's $1.10 on the single tax rate in FY17, and it decreases as we go down, not only because the debt service decreases at this level, but because property values go up. So it's $1.10 on the single rate. I think it's something like 91 cents on the residential rate. So what just happened? We're still funding capital at our full levels, and we still have money in both capital stabilization and our debt exclusion stabilization. Now you can see that the money starts to build up here once we get past this little hump where the big pieces come on all at once. What we can do is relook at this number. So, and I just put it in at FY29, we could reset this $1.8 million at any point in time, and I would suggest we look at it each year to reset it to a number where it's sustainable. So if we set at this point in FY29, let's make it $1.3 million instead. So I've just, in FY29, I've decreased the exposure on the taxpayer from $1.8 million to $1.3 million. I still have money in my debt exclusion stabilization. I haven't touched capital stabilization at those levels. I'm still spending all my capital needs. Can actually come in later on and in FY 36 to 45, say I don't want to expose the taxpayer anymore. How did that work out? Still have plenty of cash in our debt exclusion stabilization. So that target can be really pushed back at some other point in time. So we could probably knock a couple more years off of that. Once we get to this level, if there's no other projects coming down the pike, which there probably will be, but if there's nothing else, those funds can be transferred back to capital stabilization to fund any further needs there. You have to bear in mind that we're only talking about these projects. We're not talking about community center. We're not talking about Shaker Lane, which we're talking about a 30-year-old building by the time this plan is halfway through. It's another alternative approach. The big impact, of course, is the tax bill. So let's look at tax bill impact. This is the existing debt service. The excluded debt right now runs out in FY31. This is the tax impacts, actuals up to this point, and then the estimates going forward based on increases in, projected increases in value. We're talking about total from FY17 to FY35 of $4,300 that the taxpayer, in total for those years, that the taxpayer is paying on our current excluded debt. If we look at the scenario that we just pushed through, the $1.8 million going down to the $1.3 million, the taxpayer is paying a total of $7,000. I could go back into this chart here, and if we can do a reset instead of the $1.3 million, bring it to $1.2 million. Still have capital stabilization money sitting there. Look at the tax bill now, $6.9 million. So we're talking about an extra $2,600 or $140 per year extra from 17 moving forward. So is the taxpayer impacted? Yes, but we're also building $26 million of projects for $140 in taxes. Not touching the operating budget, totally separate. No additional pressure put on any of these projects to the operating budget. It's standing on its own. Questions?
Is there a way you can show us, you have this one loaded? It compares the exposure of debt, and compares it to what the out-of-pocket costs would be for the taxpayers.
So the red is the debt service, the excluded debt. And the blue would be the net debt service. I don't know why the rest of it's not showing here. I'd have to fix that. So what this should be showing is the red would be going up. And we see the blue, which is the net. So now we've capped it at that 1.2 million. So in these years here, you can see the actual debt service, and you can see by the numbers over here, the actual debt service goes up. Let's open this up. Oh, that's why it's not showing. Okay. There we go. The actual debt service that's being excluded is here. However, we're limiting the exposure to the taxpayer to this blue. And by the time we get out to FY35, there is no exposure to the taxpayer, even though we are still paying this debt service, but we're using capital stabilization, debt exclusion stabilization to cover it. And here's the numbers with it. So this is, for example, as you can see, so in FY40, it's 1,098,000, and we're covering 1,098,000. 1,088,000, we're covering 800. It's a plan that can work. It does have a little impact to the taxpayer, but we're actually doing a lot with the resources that we currently have. We've spent the past 10 years to put us in a place where this is possible. If you talked to us 10, 15 years ago when we were going through this exact same scenario, and we tried something similar, we didn't have, number one, the discipline to keep the funds separate. So there was a lot of mixing between our debt service and our operating budget. We didn't have a capital plan at that point in time. We were funding capital, like I said, either through debt or eventually capital exclusions.
Steve, can you show us the impact to the taxpayer if we go down the road that we're headed down right now? If we didn't change to this model?
Okay, so this is, like I said, this is the excluded debt. The potential that could happen, and it's the potential with the operating budget, like anything else. And all I can do is give an example of the operating override that we had back in FY06. We did a $1.5 million override, operational override. Operational overrides continue and just compound year after year.
Okay, but if we move forward from 2017.
Yep, we're right here,
Thank you.
okay? So,
You're not showing me the impact to the taxpayer, though.
right here, there is no impact to the taxpayer. It's raising inside the levy. The only thing is, we have a shortfall. Town could either say, we live with that shortfall, we shortchange capital, we hurt the operating budget by moving those funds over, still has an impact to the taxpayer. It's impact to the operating budget. Now, if you want to get those services back, then you're talking an operational override, which then impacts the taxpayer. When that happens in this scenario, it looks like FY27 could be the beginning of when you start feeling the pressure. All this is an unknown.
So there are other,
But
there are
it's
other
showing,
amounts as well,
but
right?
it's
So
showing the
income,
potential
revenue.
of what could happen. This deals with the unknown. This has a plan then to say, I'm not gonna touch my operating budget, I'm not touching my capital plan, and I'm trying to limit the impact to the taxpayer as much as possible to have that luxury in the operating budget.
First, thank you, Steve, and I want to hear from FinCom as well, but Chuck, you dove in. I don't know if you have more questions. I'm sure Selectman Glavy has questions.
I've got no shortage of them, Steve. First off, this is consistent, but, you know, we received this printed document over the weekend, and it's not the first time in many capacities, selectmen, citizen, finance committee member, where we get 10, 15-page documents with various scenarios of financial projections, and we never get, we might get a PDF copy by, digitally if we want, but we never get a interactive version of the file so that we can actually test the assumptions, especially since we're looking at things that might become spooky in the year 2026. I think that's particularly important. And at the very least, I think it's important that we have this in enough time to digest it. Otherwise, we're left in a position of being numbed with numbers as it's presented. And then, you know, what are our choices to, you know, nod our heads and say, must be right, I didn't get it all, but boy, you put a lot of thought into it. But I picked up on certain things that I think are contestable. The notion that prior to 10 years ago, we didn't have a capital plan. Well, sure we have. We make improvements on it over time, all the time. And that the work over the past 10 years, while it's been very good, it wasn't 10 years ago that we created the stability in our budget. It was 20 years ago when we took the high school debt under the levy limit and took the work that it took for 5 years to create that space, and then subsequently work on the Shaker Lane School, as well as the renovation of this building. Now, obviously, there's the benefit to the taxpayer is pretty clear there. They didn't have to pay increased taxes. The other fundamental benefit to that was that it created a strength in the under the levy limit, so that the operating budget could grow as it has in excess of revenue projections. We all know that. So anything that creates a disproportion that increases operating budget percentage of the levy limit spending versus the debt spending under the levy limit is going to be less and less sustainable over time. And I think we hear that in the projections that Bonnie has made, I think largely with your input, annually when we get a projection, usually a little bit later in the year, on the operating scenarios. In fact, this year we're in right now, what is it, FY17? 3 years ago, we were supposed to be in a, you know, operating deficit hell. Well, that didn't happen. We added 2.5 teachers this year, we added a police officer, we added a $70,000 engineer. You know, not to be Pollyanna-ish, but I'm a little skeptical on projections until I see the assumptions that they're based on. And I can't help but think that there's no case has been made to increase people's taxes now because there's a potential for a problem down the road with prospective projects, which we all understand come down the pike. We deal with this on an annual basis. But at the very same time that the schools and the police stations will be getting older, the debt that we're about to incur is also going to be getting amortized, just as the debt for the middle school, the Shaker Lane School, the high school, and the town hall have all, over the levy limit projections as well. Now, it sounds like this notion of maintaining the tax rate is really saying that a couple of the overrides that were passed by the town for the police station and the middle school, which I supported, because we had no other funding mechanisms at the time, what's being proposed, although you didn't see it in so many words anyway here, is to maintain an override for that dollar amount, kind of similar to the strategy that the Mass Turnpike uses, which in 1978, the highways were paid for, but we're going to keep collecting those tolls because we're used to the cash flow. I think the suggestion, we should double down on our strengths, and we've been receiving AAA bond ratings based on our practice, and our practice has been to fund projects within the levy limit when we can, and to not fund them when we can't. And an incumbent of all that is to prioritize. So if you find a way to fund every project under the levy limit, or over the levy limit, or some combination thereof, then you've taken away one of our primary executive responsibilities, and that's to make decisions. And I think we ought to let that process play out. And beyond that, these projections are interesting. I look forward to seeing what the assumptions are and having a chance to play with the models myself. But right now, we're on track to pay for a fire station and some work on the fields and probably other work for no other simple reason than debt is coming off the books for 3 other projects. It's not trickery. It's not anything less than a product of our prior good planning. So if there's a reason that we should change that practice, then I'm all here for it. But I think we risk jeopardizing those capital projects if we're going to be asking people to vote on tax increases when they will be demonstrably informed that they are not necessary. That's my point.
Chuck, anything else, Mike?
No, I'll just say that, I'll just say
Oh, I'm
that,
sorry, yeah.
Just a couple of points that Paul made. Let's go back to the high school. So here's our debt service on the high school.
Is that in our packet here?
No, it's
No,
it's
I
right
know,
here.
okay. It's good. So, give me a
Actual
chance to
debt
memorize it.
service on the high school from FY01, when we first started the short term and during construction, bonding in FY04, debt is gone in FY23. If you remember, Paul, we funded these first 4 years out of our stabilization account.
Which we created specifically for that purpose.
Absolutely. However, we stopped putting money into stabilization back here as we got budget pressure.
No, it was part of a plan. It wasn't budget pressure that
It wasn't part of the
forced it.
plan.
Yes.
Part of the plan,
Yeah, well, you can call it Mark Haddad and Groton, he wrote the plan.
absolutely, and I was on finance committee, and I
I
can
know,
remember
you were
this.
opposed to this at the time.
We were opposed to this because of what I'm about to show you.
Yeah.
Okay. So we stopped being able to fund the stabilization account. If you recall, we're putting money, into stabilization. If it's inside the levy, we should be able to continue doing that. If we had, number one, the financial policies we have in place today, or we didn't have the budget pressures with commingling of funds. Schools came, the high school came online right around that time, FY02, I believe. The school budget at that point in time was putting tremendous pressure on the operating budget. We had to, because we sucked $1 million out of the operating budget to pay the debt service, it resulted in this operational override, direct result. You can't look at one
I sure can.
without seeing the other, and I know you can.
You're stacking up a bunch of untruths, and I'd like to kind of address
So
them before you get too many on the
let's-
table.
let's look at what
First off,
happened
the
here.
exact
So-
plan
wait.
that was created by the selectmen with the town administrator at the time was to make contributions to the stabilization fund until that amount was big enough that it would equal the combination of using the accumulated stabilization fund plus the space that was then created would assume the debt payments over time. So it wasn't that it stopped because we could no longer make contributions. We didn't need to make any further contributions at that time. Follow your argument through further. If instead that $1.2 million was spent on operating expenditures instead back then, what's the growth factor that we'd be looking at now if that were instead operating expenses? What's the rate of increase annually?
Of this $1.5 million right now?
Compounded, yeah.
Compounded in FY17, we're up to $2 million. If it was a debt exclusion back then, as the Finance Committee wanted, these would be the tax rates associated Here is
I'm not sure
the,
you heard my point.
Here is
If
the-
the money that
here
was
is the
spent
money.
on debt service was instead spent on operating expenses, what kind of deficit would we be looking at right now?
we wouldn't have had to do this operational override.
Hardly.
You and I are never going to agree on this, Paul.
Yeah, well,
Never.
Maybe this is a good point to get some FinCom input and, I don't see Fred, I see you out there. I see. Any comments from FinCom, questions? Any, I don't see, what's up, Steve? No?
Any input?
Any input on
FinCom?
Cindy's presentation?
But I think there's a bit of a middle ground here. One is, those of us that lived through the pain of putting the high school inside 2.5, the one thing that nobody's talking about is back then, the inflation rate was significantly higher, and people's increases on a yearly basis were significantly higher than they are now, which drove the operating budget to expand at an unusually high rate. Second thing is that, don't forget that even after we did the operational override, in order to spend any money on capital, there were 5 or 6 years in a row where we asked the taxpayers to fund capital exclusions, which are in effect 1 year, 2.5 overrides for capital spending. So in effect, we did the override for $1.5 million plus whatever I won't say whatever we spent, a significant piece of what we spent for capital in those, I think it was 6 years, 5 or 6 years, Alan, I can't remember, in that range, in effect were incremental overrides that the taxpayers paid, because we basically ran out of money in the operating budget. And Paul will tell you we spent like drunken sailors.
well, go back and check it. I mean, depending upon, if it's budget time and we're listening to the school budget, you'll tell them they're asking for too much and that they're getting increases. Now, in this setting,
No, but-
oh gee, it was unavoidable.
Well,
But,
you go
but as
back-
far as the
you go
1 year
back
debt
and look.
exclusions.
You go back and look at how many people were not replaced, how many people did not get
Well, that's-
raises for years.
It's a dramatically different argument than you made last winter in budget season, but.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
Absolutely
certainly.
not.
And as far as the one-time debt exclusions, that's part and parcel of what we're following here. When you can afford to do something under the levy limit, and it's a high priority, like a fire station, like a high school, you do it. When you can't afford it, when you've already used up your debt, well, then you go back and you faithfully ask the town, look, we've done the best we can, but we need a tax increase here. We've done that for the middle school, we did that for the police station, I was actively supportive of that. And for a period of time when we didn't have our capital house in order, there was a number of years where we had debt exclusions on an annual basis to cover certain capital expenses. We've gotten away from that, so I'll credit previous board members because I just got here, so I'm not sure how that becomes an argument to sustain 2 overrides that the townspeople voted for on the assumption that they would be going away when the debt was retired. That sounds like what's on the table.
What's on the table is to ask for overrides on all of these projects.
Okay.
And peg the taxpayers' annual contribution to what they're currently paying on those previously excluded projects.
Well, if you have confidence in this data, then I'd ask you to put it on the website in an interactive form, so anybody in town who wants to go in and poke around in these numbers and play with their own scenarios, so they can have some input, rather than just looking at finished copies, I'd be happy to have that happen.
And to your point earlier, Selectman Glavy, we did just, as Selectmen, receive these Friday night. We're missing 2 board members for sure, so we need to take this in, have time to, ask our own questions about it. Interactive version would be great, and then we go from there. But we need to have
the
those
position
discussions.
called for
Yeah.
tonight, we had been tasked to update you on.
Okay, we have other topics to talk about here.
And we had the debt projections last time. We were asked to add what the impact on the capital plan is. So that's the additional information you're getting. There's some problem diagnosis going on, and the very, I'd say, innovative and unique proposal that Steve's put on the table of if we were to shift our focus to what is the impact on the property taxpayer in the long term and peg a number, that there is a way through use of debt exclusion ballot questions and a debt exclusion stabilization fund that you can stabilize what the amount is that's paid by property taxpayers for our capital projects and for our even the big new ones at a level that is not any more than what they're paying now.
And that level is less than the threshold for paying, which was defined as 2014, when everything kind of came on at once. All the debt service was placed and booked, and everybody just kind of gasped.
So it's a lot of food for thought. We're happy to share the
Yeah,
information
lot of food for
in
thought.
whatever form, so that folks can ask questions and be delighted to.
Speaking of which, I want to wrap up, but just one question. I see Daryl from.
Yeah, I just had one.
Name and address, I know who you are, but name and address.
Who are you?
Daryl Baker, Gristmill Road. Appreciate the presentation. The one piece that I guess is not clear to me is how much we're asking the taxpayers out of their current tax rate to bank into the stabilization accounts, and whether that's something that should be on the table in terms of consideration, because at one point you had the stabilization fund up to $11 million. That's money out of my pocket for a future account, which I don't know where that choice has been made in this process. As a taxpayer, I may want that immediately relieved and then assessed to me when that bill comes online. I mean, you've taken one of the variables out of the decision process there, that perhaps you should be looking at the scenario of your capping either the amount contributed to stabilization or the absolute value of the stabilization account, because that could result in offsets to the current tax rate, which is not included in these scenarios. So again, the net impact, because over the long term, I'm going to have to pay for these projects. And I guess I would like some better understanding of who's banking that money. Am I banking it as in,
Your
there,
account.
or is the town banking it on my behalf? And that, I think, is part of the call that I, as a
Balance.
taxpayer, should have a say in terms of what happens with my tax rate for that particular year.
The question makes sense.
I'm just gonna jump in.
These-
So
these
to have some
funds-
alternatives, I think is great. For us to look at, that's why I asked you what is the impact?
Yep.
And if people can take a look and see, okay, if this, then this. And, I mean, it's been helpful for me to sit through your presentation. Looking at the presentation static, it was, I don't
It
know.
wasn't easy to put in this slide.
No, exactly, I understand that, so I appreciate the presentation. I like the interactive worksheets, so people can, personally, I'd like to be able to play with the numbers a little bit and find out, maybe there's somewhere in between. Fred mentioned a hybrid, somewhere in between, a happy medium. I think maybe that's where we end up. But appreciate the effort, and Darrell made a good point as well. And, just with looking at what the assumptions are and how we get to X and what the impact is to the taxpayer. I want to go through that and get a better understanding for myself in order to make a decision on behalf of.
To try and answer Darrell's question, these figures, both capital stabilization and debt exclusion stabilization, are being raised inside the levy. It's not extra tax dollars. It's dollars that are currently being raised.
Those could not be levied.
This
is what my
$3.3 million.
point is.
To not levy them would mean we wouldn't be raising to our levy limit, which the town hasn't done and can't do according to our policies until we meet certain thresholds. We haven't met those yet.
Okay, I'm just gonna, okay, well,
And just one other piece there is one other variable to consider there is what's the impact of keeping the capital spending at the $2 million, and how does that vary between the two scenarios there? You showed it going down. What if we chose to keep that in the operating budget flat and then move everything else to debt exclusion? I think there's one other scenario in there that wasn't quite.
I think that was kind of my point, kind of piggybacking on what Fred was saying, that there is somewhere in between, and if we can use this as an interactive model, and we can kind of play with it and do exactly what you're talking about, Darryl, then we collectively can come up with maybe what's best for everyone, with that input.
Okay, good. All right, just two more questions. Yes.
Mark Rambacher, 205 Hartwell. So if I understand this model correctly, we're basically saying that all large capital projects are put out to vote for the taxpayer, which is a good thing. All the projects are going to be funded within basically what we're paying now, which is also a good thing. And the projects are all standing on their own merit, meaning I can vote for the fire station and the library and Alumni Field independently without saying whichever one gets in first, I'm going to get the money for it, right? So I'm trying to figure out what's the bad thing here, right? It looks like a win all the way around because every project is voted on by everyone that cares, and they're all standalone. If you don't want to support one, you don't support one, it doesn't get funded, there's no impact, right? If you do support them, they're all independent. We're not racing to everyone getting in first. So.
Two differences I can spot right off of that, Mark. Under the current system, they'd all get voted on by the town as well. If they're being proposed as an override, they'll get voted as an override. They get proposed as part of the operating budget, borrowing plan, and they get voted at a town meeting. That's the way that the law prescribes, that's what we've done.
Yes, but when things are voted at town meeting, we're talking voting by a couple hundred. When we're talking voted at the elections.
It's our form of government, Mark. That's the form of government we have.
And the second point is, this scenario is, as I just heard it was, all of these will be proposed as debt exclusions. We may not use them all, so I'm being asked, trust some future body of folks not to use the ability to increase my taxes that you're asking me to vote for. I'm not familiar with that model, and I'm not sure I embrace it. I'm sure I don't.
Mr. Moore, name and address.
Steve Moore, 12 Robinwood. If I understood Steve's presentation correctly, he indicated funding capital projects at the same level from, going forward without any thought to escalation. And I would just say currently they're underfunded. So I would say that we would continue underfunding them at the current levels.
And that's what this capital stabilization would be used for, Steve, is to fund those shortfalls or increases as we go along.
Although no withdrawals shown there. Is that right?
Not in these scenarios.
No withdrawals are shown because we're keeping capital at this $2 million level.
Right.
Okay, very good. Thank you for putting this together. And now we'll need to take some time with that model and to let our other two board members do the same and digest this and get time with you guys to ask questions as well, and we'll come back to that. All right.
If I may, real quickly. Folks, I apologize if you see me keep picking up my phone. I had, my son got injured tonight, and because we had 2 members missing, I'm here so that we have a quorum, because didn't want you folks to all be left out in the cold. So if you see me looking down at my phone, I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm not going to stop looking at my phone either. So just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
Father of the Year, sitting here with you guys.
Yeah, we have one sick, one injured
Yeah, I know, I
child.
came off my sick bed to be here.
Exactly.
It was a good fight in store, so I had to come.
All right, up next, B, library building project with library trustees, school committee, and PMBC. All right, so there's not really a lot of room to move y'all up to the front, but Joe, I see you out there. Mark, I see you. Oh, yeah. Right now, you mean?
You do the, yeah, you did have a posted joint meeting. The only thing that you have that you noticed, for which there was notice for tonight's meeting, the 7:15 joint meeting with Park and Rec, we have one applicant, and.
Oh, boy, okay.
Would be a
Yeah, good call.
7:15.
Yeah, good call.
You guys stand by?
meeting.
Yeah.
It's here, I think,
Mr. Austin's here.
okay.
But it's a joint meeting, right? You guys are in session?
Yes, here's,
Mr. Hunt?
yeah, Kevin had to leave to go pick up his kid.
Like a good father.
Yeah, I can see it.
Thanks, Paul.
Does that mean?
He's a good father, though.
Is that okay to proceed?
Can we, without them having a quorum, can we do it?
Yeah, sure, yeah, it's the remaining members
All right.
of their board plus the selectmen.
All right, we're just going to change stuff up a little bit to get a very quick agenda item done and then move on. Because we're going so late here, it's to fill the vacancy on the Park and Recreation Commission. And I say this should be relatively short because there is one applicant. All right, so let's see here.
I say we grill them.
Garrett, you guys could come up a little, I mean.
No,
gosh, you're fine.
I'll grill them on my own time.
All right, well.
Friday night in the Lava booth, I'm gonna come after you, Gary. I'm gonna ask you some tough questions.
At the grill.
So we had a resignation, so we have to fill this vacancy, and we have one applicant, Gary Austin, who has a lot of experience, and we have a recommendation from the Park and Rec Committee to support Gary in the appointment. I've spoken with folks that have a lot of great stuff to say, for sure, so I have no issues with this.
I don't have any issues either. Gary, is your intention to run, I mean, you just let your term expire and let somebody else run for your seat. Do you hope to run to get back on, or are you just gonna kind of do us a favor and hold the seat warm?
I never want to be a career politician, and that's what Park and Rec has turned it into. But I do think the kids in this town deserve someone fighting for them. So yes, I will.
Fantastic.
You had a 4-month rest, is that enough? You're ready to go again?
Barely had a chance to forget about it.
All right.
Ready?
Absolutely.
Move that the Board of Selectmen and the remaining members of the Park and Recreation Commission vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 41, subsection 11, to appoint Gary Austin to fill a vacancy on the Park and Rec Commission through the May 2017 annual town election.
I will second, I believe it has to be a roll call vote, is that right,
Will
Keith?
be a roll call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been moved and seconded, Selectman DeCoste?
I'm in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
These guys.
You guys,
Mike?
roll call?
How many of you are here?
Aye.
Yes. Yes.
And that's it, right?
That's it.
5, we need 5.
Hey,
About 5.
magical number.
Snuck in.
Congratulations and thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary.
All right, very good, good call. Back to 2B. Or not 2B. Library Building Project,
Thank you,
Library
guys.
Trustees, School Committee, and PMBC. Okay, we've got library, I saw PMBC, and school, I saw mixed and all around. All right, we're all here. Okay, so there's maybe a couple of different items here, but one is clearing up the site ownership discussion, for sure.
Yeah, we had some recent opinions from town council clarifying that either of the two sites that were under consideration on this parcel for a library, either the existing site or the so-called slope site, either one is under the care, custody, management, and control of the school committee, according to council's research of town meeting votes. So it would take a vote of the school committee. For starters, it would take a vote of the school committee to declare that site, the chosen site, as surplus to the school's needs in order to make that site available to the library. It's our understanding from the conversations between town council and the Mass Board of Library Commissioners that even though a town meeting vote would ultimately be required to transfer control of the site to the library commissioners, in order to meet the deadline of January 2017 for the funding application, the funding agency will accept a surplus vote from the school committee, period, basically, on the condition, and with the condition that the surplus vote is subject to further votes of town meeting to transfer the property elsewhere, and awarding of the grant by the state funding agency, and a further vote of a future town meeting to appropriate the local share, but the Mass Board of Library Commissioners is not requiring a town meeting vote between now and January in order to clear the way for the commissioners to submit a funding application. So it would take a vote from the school committee. Town council has crafted what that vote might look like. Town council was also asked to get from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners just what is it that town meeting would have to vote and when. And just so we're all aware of that, the state would require that by June of 2017, town meeting itself vote to conditionally transfer the site to the library trustees, subject to further award of a grant application, which will not have been made yet, will not have been made by June, and a subsequent vote that would have to come within 6 months of award of a grant to have the town appropriate the local share, to authorize borrowing of the local share. The way our town meetings work, the way the schedule works, if there's a June deadline, a June 2017 deadline, that would mean that the May 2017 town meeting would need to vote on the matter of authorizing the site to be transferred, conditionally transferred to the library trustees. If we were then awarded the grant in, I guess, July, or is the first, next July would be the first set of grant awards, and then they might be on a rolling basis thereafter. At whatever point, Littleton is notified that it has been awarded a grant. Within 6 months of that notice, a town meeting would need to vote to authorize the local share. So that means that the soonest that town meeting would need to vote to authorize the local share would be November 2017. If there's an award in July of 2017. The only thing that we hope, and if you can attach Steve's projections, that we are not going to be able to afford the local match within any of the scenarios that we're looking at, inside, outside, which way of the debt, that if that amount could be pushed forward a few years, it would be vastly easier for us to fit it into any fiscal plan. So Sam had mentioned at a staff meeting that maybe you can put it in your grant application. We really want this, and but we'd really like it a few years from now. And if there's a way for you to say that, that'd be great. So.
Very good.
So just Darrell Baker School Committee this time.
As opposed to the other guy.
As opposed to resident.
Yeah.
I saw the original email. I think it went out to all of us with the draft motion. I responded, but in order not to do a discussion, I did not send it to the entire piece there. I sent it to the chairs, and I think to you, Keith, there, that the school committee would initially prefer to maybe try to clean up ownership of the whole site and not have to go through multiple motions to do it. Our working proposal is that we split the site. I usually called it Lot 1 and Lot 2, where we have the municipal parts of it, which includes this building, up until about the boundary on the other side of where the proposed library would go. That the school would prefer to just declare that surplus so that the municipal use property is actually available for municipal use instead of artificially calling it school property at that point. Interesting. And then what you could do is then the selectmen could
And the Board of
subdivide.
Selectmen could declare it.
Well, no, then the selectmen could subdivide it for whatever purposes afterwards and not have the schools involved in that part of the process.
Well played. Well, we,
You know, and then I think in terms of trying to clean up 50-year-old, 75-year-old titles, it cleans up things a lot better.
if I could, we had asked town council, and he has drafted a proposed article for the warrant, which would at least create what we thought was the status quo, which was that the selectmen are in charge of the municipal functions, and the school committee are in charge of the school functions on this property, and we were discussing whether to bring that much at least to a November town meeting, that is to do the cleanup. If I'm catching the drift of it, though, what that would allow is, if it were in municipal use, then the school committee wouldn't need to declare it a surplus because it would be then.
Fall under our custody and care control.
Yeah.
So, which which I think is.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't
good
just send it out to
thing
everybody
explore.
because
Yeah.
I wanted to be careful, respectful.
We're all in
of the
favor of
city,
cleaning up what,
law there.
the 50-year-old votes.
So, Keith, Mark Hawker, library trustee. We're fine with that, but what we would request as the trustees is that means that you also vote to allow us to use the slope site in addition to the school committee. So now we have both boards, whoever owns it at the given time, we're clear, right?
And is January your deadline for that, or is there an earlier deadline? I saw there was an October 7th.
So we have an October deadline that we have to do some geotechnical work by.
Yeah.
But all we need is your permission, we don't need a formal vote.
Okay.
And the school committee gave us permission for that already.
Okay.
So we're fine on that part, but if we're getting into town meeting and then trying to figure out, who owns it when, we're getting late on our grant deadlines. It would be clearer for us just to have both boards say, the library can use it pending whatever conditions, and we'll just go and say, yes, we have the permissions, and whatever the actual language ends up being, we'll deal with it in May.
What I had proposed before, and you were here, and I stick by it, is that any title issue with the land should not be, a deal breaker here. But even if, and I'd be happy to support a, measure making it available to the library trustees, that, I just don't want to see that get us to a point where that's taken as an endorsement for either that site or, the project as it currently sits. There's two different issues there. I, do whatever it takes to make sure the land is not an issue, and then let the issue get debated on its merits beyond that.
So how do we
Are
do
you
that?
saying you're going to give us a slope site?
My recommendation, we haven't met as a full committee
Yeah.
because we're still trying to figure out what I'm going to propose to the committee for discussion is that we consider splitting the site at that little red line that was in that drawing. That we get it surveyed properly so that we know that we're
Right,
not
we can draw the line
encroaching.
wherever we wish, and then that town meeting vote.
And then
Keith, following up on Darrell's suggestion, even if the school committee voted to give that away, I don't know if that has enough standing legally. We still might have to get a vote.
Yes, but
A
in
town meeting
the,
anyway.
right, in the short term, the only goal is to whisper in the ear of the Mass Board of Library
Right.
Commissioners whatever sweet nothings they want to hear. So,
Yeah, if they can tell with
because
that,
it's not
fine.
going to mean anything, it doesn't mean anything. It's not final and binding until town meeting votes,
Right,
but they will take a surplus vote
Yeah, so-
from somebody, from the
Both of them.
the relevant town board.
the school committee has indicated they'll support making the property available for there. But I was just recommending that if we're going to do all of the pieces here, we might as well clean up ownership of the whole site.
Yeah.
So that we're not reaching back in the future
Yeah.
to try to figure this out.
But at this point, the slope site is clearly in the care, custody, and control of the schools.
Yeah, as is this building.
Yeah.
To your point, I
And
don't,
however, our school building, you need to vote to give it to us over in,
A portion of the so-called athletic field
yeah.
property. Yes,
Yeah,
there's
and there's some
there's a
funny
quid
things on
pro
that.
quo.
That's what I mean, I think we ought to clean that all up.
Yeah.
And
Yep, that makes total sense. Absolutely.
I think everything's okay right now, because if they voted to say you're okay.
we haven't voted yet.
No, they haven't voted yet, and
We haven't met.
We're probably gonna have to do a similar vote after.
Well, we don't have care, custody, and control, so it's,
After they vote, then it comes to us and we have to.
once it comes to us, I think that's when we can vote.
Then it's after town
So
meeting.
where it gets weird is if we're going along and then town meeting changes the ownership, right, then we have to come back to you to get another vote, right? And it would be clear, it would be easier if we just said, if it's in our control, you're welcome to use it. They already said it's in their control. So if it transfers, we're not in a limbo state for a while. That's all I'm saying.
But, so we can do this up until January.
Well,
We
if town, let's say, if you bring the matter to town meeting of doing the switch to have the municipal property be under the selectmen and the school property under the school committee with slope site treated as municipal, If town meeting for some reason doesn't pass that, then it's still with the schools.
Right.
And the schools will have still given you a
Right.
vote.
Right.
So,
But if it does pass, then we have to come back here and scramble to make
Right.
sure that we're meeting the rest of our deadlines. Whereas if you vote that if it's under your control, we can have it, and the school votes if it's under their control, we can have it, then we're clear through January. That's all I'm saying, right? It's not, and we don't actually know.
I hear you, Mike, I'd only want one step. I think procedurally, it ought to be a vote of the
I
school
agree.
committee first, and then come to us, and that could happen as quick as our next meeting, as long as it's, you know.
So we're on their agenda for Thursday.
Perfect.
To discuss this.
Gotta get married before you get divorced.
So,
right?
for another point of clarification, we're talking slope sites, but we don't actually have like a plot plan
Yeah,
for what we
that-
need.
that's what I mean.
So that's gonna come in the next, we're working with the architect to get the actual GIS lines.
So you're not necessarily looking for us to vote tonight? You understand that there's gonna be a process, and I agree with Paul on this, that
I just don't I don't wanna be going down this route in November and then have to come back, that's all I'm
To
saying.
Paul's point, though, I don't think there's anyone here that's gonna put this in the way of a library project.
But I think procedurally, you're gonna have to have a survey or plan or something that we're actually approving. We can't, I don't think we can just approve generically something called a slope site.
Wink and nod.
No, I mean, surveying has gotta get done, plans have gotta get drawn. I'm asking you,
and if you're having your architect prepare the site plan that will show us
Yes.
just what should be declared surplus, then that's where we ought to get.
Yeah, it gets kind of, I mean, it then depends, how much of the road do we take, and, all this gets kind of, where you draw the line on the site. There's also the potential that we get reimbursed a certain percentage of the cost of the site from MBLC. It's not entirely clear, since the town already owns it and has owned it for a long time.
We
What
could
we
sell
could
it.
get-
Yeah, you want us to sell it to you?
Because that is a reimbursable expense.
Yes. So-
Steve's gonna have to redo everything.
Which also means that, if we get reimbursed for a certain percentage, maybe we want a larger lot than we really need, because we'll get more money, right?
There is a formula that I know that allows
Yes.
you to include the value of
Yeah.
donated property, so.
We're working that one out too.
Yeah. It sounds like we're on the same page tonight, and so the next step is school committee, and then we'll plan to have it back on our agenda on 2 weeks from tonight.
I guess I would like, in terms of the school committee, to request that we be looking at how we could execute the bigger plan of just cleaning up the ownership, and whether that could be prepared in time for town meeting, or is that need a wholly separate set of timelines?
No,
for that?
I've got the article, we've got the article all written, but we would just have to be in agreement on what the plan looked like. So it's possible, it's doable.
Well, because I'll report that at Thursday's meeting as we're debating whether we're gonna give them the property or
You
not.
can share you can share the proposed language with them, Keith,
Yeah,
right?
we've got, we have the, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay.
I know that was the big topic. Is there anything else that we should talk about regarding the library while we're all here?
As updates.
Oh, that was the easy part.
So,
But you were watching though, right, 2024?
Make that happen?
Were you saying something, Marge?
so just to be clear, the school committee is planning on voting on Thursday on a plan for on the dividing for the warrant article, or, I'm not sure exactly what the,
No, the discussion, my understanding, Thursday is the trustees asked to be on the school committee agenda. The Chairman Fontanella agreed to that, and so they're going to take up the matter of the surplus declaration that the library trustees have requested. I'm happy to have the further discussion about fixing the 50-year-old anomaly that the selectmen aren't in charge of the town hall.
so effectively Thursday until town meeting, if the school committee so votes, we, lack of a better term, own the site, right?
You
We
would
have
have what, as soon as the school committee votes, its conditional vote to declare it
Yes.
surplus, you will have what you need
Mhm.
to give to the Mass Board of Library
Okay.
Commissioners, but you can't go to the bank with that.
Yeah,
You
yeah. I
can go to
understand
the
that.
funding agency.
And I think without all the formal, I haven't seen any of the formal documents, so I think we'd only be voting that conceptually we concur that we, upon receipt of
Yep.
surveyed plans and the other pieces, do the
Yep.
formal release.
When
And
the
then
select-
we'd have to vote that when we actually had the final document.
Yep.
I think we also give you as agreement and concept.
Okay.
Here.
We've done that too. We've had votes between the Selectmen and Conservation Commission that are about property that is subject to engineered plan being prepared, consistent with the vote. So I think that's what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Is it a hearing? I don't think it's a hearing.
Not a hearing?
7:45 wasn't a hearing, right?
No, it's not a hearing.
Just a change license?
All right. Okay, I think that was the critical path item for tonight. If there's not anything else urgent for library, I'd say let's move on because we still got a ton of stuff to get through. Good.
People in the room.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. That is sorting that out.
Thank you for the updates
Still
on
have-
the survey as well.
We have lots to talk about.
So there's, do you guys have anything on the warrant, right? Library trustees, well, I mean, we've got the joint meeting discussing the warrant.
Well, that's the article on the transfer of the land.
That's it, yeah.
That's really it.
Okay, you can leave.
Or you could say, whatever you like.
Maybe I could say, just on the town meeting article, we're going to talk about that, the town meeting warrant, agenda item, we're going to stick with that.
Right.
That at the special meeting that Selectmen had last Wednesday, there were a number of articles that the board voted to insert. And just so the room is aware, bills of prior years, amending the classification and compensation plan to adjust for the new state minimum wage of $11 per hour. A generic article allowing for FY 2017 budget amendments, and those can include adjustments that the school committee wants or other town departments. Fire station facility expansion, construction, alumni field renovation, construction, rescinding unused borrowing authority, Mill Pond restoration, supplemental funding for the feasibility study. Two land articles, land acquisition articles that inserted. One is to acquire 5 acres of surplus Mass DOT property on Boxborough Road for conservation purposes. Another one to acquire 32 acres of property also on Boxborough Road, owned by Joyce Williams. And I should mention that both the surplus Mass DOT property and the Joyce Williams property, both of them, are proposed to be funded with CPA funds. So we would need to get a co-sponsorship from the Community Preservation Committee, and I'm glad to talk to you further about that. Bonnie has generated the projections that we can do those, and then probably take a big pause, press the pause button before we do any major CPA spending after that. The other articles the board has submitted: restrict development for tax title purposes on Narcissus Road, 4 parcels, for discussion, and to establish an other post-employment benefits liability trust fund. So I wanted to make sure they got a plug-in for the 2 articles for the community preservation that would need community preservation funding. There was another one which we need not bring forward at this town meeting, but if we wanted to, we could, that we've been making appropriations into the so-called blended community preservation fund, supplemental appropriations. Our limit this year is we can put in about another $500,000, maybe a little more, into the fund to increase our base for state match. We've identified at least that much money, which we'll have by the Springtown meeting. We've got $425,000 in hand now, $300,000 for the potpourri group mitigation funds, $125,000 that's been paid year to date from the 15 Great Road mitigation. So there's $425,000. We will, on an annual basis, take in another $78,000 from the Newtown Hill cell tower funds for open space purposes. Collectively, that'll get us over $500,000. There's no requirement that we do that at a fall town meeting. It would be important not to spend those mitigation funds in the meantime, though. And we could bring it to a Springtown meeting. What counts is, what have we put in the fund by June 30? And we were projecting that we would have enough to put up to the maximum, again, for third year in a row under the blended community preservation fund, which would mean additional state matching funds. I'm not aware of any other community preservation projects that might find their way to fall town meeting.
There's the Littleton,
Mitt, if you could-
hi, Mitt Wongser, 39 Mill Road, Community Preservation Committee. We heard at our last meeting last week from Pamela Campbell about Littleton, a proposed Littleton rental voucher program, which she would like to see implemented, and I think Bartlett told me it would possibly come online in July of next year. So that could possibly be a Springtown meeting article, but we expect, well, I'll speak more with Ms. Campbell, and the application process could be completed at our next meeting, which is on the 21st of September. At that time, too, I think we need to see an application for funding to complete the process for the two land acquisitions.
Yes.
Because we looked at those in June in a preliminary way, and then with both of those in hand, we can talk about, as you referenced, Keith, we can look at the big
And
picture
it's 21st.
in terms of money.
Is the 21st your meeting?
September 21st, Wednesday.
I'll be there. Thank you.
Thank you.
The board need not insert additional articles tonight, but you do need to insert them by 2 weeks from tonight, because the warrant closes 2 weeks from Friday, and our last scheduled meeting prior to the close is September 26th. So among the other ones that are out there for consideration, if you did want to put, we have not yet funded the debt exclusion stabilization fund. You could do that if you wanted to at the fall town meeting. We have not finalized the determination of a number of supplemental capital projects. Bonnie had identified that at our last meeting, we had $440,000 in funds we won't need for the snow and ice deficit we didn't experience because there wasn't any. Yet we had planned to make up for it if we needed it. The fire chief has withdrawn his request for $285,000 for the fall town meeting. I'm sure it'll be back in the spring. There is a request that's being put together from the chiefs for $50,000 for public safety communications. We've talked previously, and cost estimates are being prepared for comprehensive needs assessment for recreation fields that was requested by Park and Rec and the town government. Building space needs assessment, which this board requested following a joint meeting with the Council on Aging and others. And we're working with the PMBC to get cost estimates of both of those. And then another project that the board wanted to consider is whether to ask for funding to proceed with the board's goal of a Littleton Common Sewer Strategic Plan. So we have a number of projects that we're still looking at. We'll need to make decisions on those, on which ones to include in the warrant at our meeting 2 weeks from tonight.
And in the meantime, we hope we get all the fill in the blanks, all the missing
Yes, we have
numbers.
to have as much information as we can get. Other projects that, other articles that we could consider, again, you don't need votes tonight. We're looking at authorizing vote to acquire the Stenstrom property that was offered as a donation. It's could be an important piece for the Mill Pond restoration
I
project.
thought we did vote to insert that
No.
one. No? Why didn't we?
We didn't?
No.
The Mill Pond donation, why wouldn't we do that?
No, you inserted the, because town council hasn't finalized it with the seller.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and we thought we
Okay.
have a higher comfort level that it was actually being donated before we
Right, right.
Sure, that's fair.
So we can report out at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then the water department is seeking to acquire 34 Cedar Road. Is Ivan going? Is the chairman of the water? I mean, we don't have our member
Text
water
it.
commission, but the water department has entered into a P&S agreement with the owner of 34 Cedar Road to acquire that property. And just don't know what the purpose was, but.
There's a water tower.
Yeah, what exactly?
Yeah.
It's for refurbishing of the water tower, and $200,000 is the purchase price. And so the water commissioners want to bring that forward. It would be a borrowing article, presumably, that could be paid off with a water department free cash certification by the annual town meeting.
So no impact to us. So, and that, do we know if that one's a residence? I know I can just go walk there and go figure this out. Do you know if there's a residence on there? Is it a patch of land, any chance?
I don't recall.
Okay, no problem.
An
No
easement
problem.
or anything like that? An easement attached to it?
No, it's.
'Cause it sits behind a residence.
Yeah, it's acquiring a fee simple from the property, it's acquiring the parcel.
Go take a look.
We have a placeholder, that town council has drafted language for town hall, middle school, Russell Street, school, parcel, care, custody, and control, so resolving that issue, so we can consider that, and we have a proposal which the board can discuss of a proposed bylaw amendment to implement the proposed plan for the finance and administration. So those are the items. You don't need to make any votes tonight to insert them. You definitely need to make votes 2 weeks from tonight on those remaining articles.
All right, and I know we have, again, it's a joint board meeting, so we've got all the boards here. I don't know what makes sense that we've already kind of talked about a little bit. Should we
Go through the list, see who's got input.
All right. Even on the ones that we inserted, you think, or the ones that we haven't?
I wouldn't stop anybody.
All right, so we are here at a joint board meeting with FinCom, PMBC, School Committee, Park and Rec-ish, Library Trustees, Council on Aging, CPC, CONSCOM, Board of Health, Water Commissioners, and the Personnel Board. So let's, like I just mentioned, I kind of mumbled it a little bit, but we've already had a chance to go through, ask our questions, provide our comments. I'm going to open up to those boards. Just raise your hand and I'll call on you. I'm just going to go through we have no.
So I think the intent of this agenda item is for the articles that we did not insert to get input, to see if that'll give us the basis to insert.
Well, actually, when we invited, on August 22nd, when we invited them, we hadn't inserted any articles, and we did insert some last week, so I think we were looking for input.
And kind of a last call if you have articles.
Yeah.
You know, you've got till 2 weeks from tonight for us to include them on the warrant.
Yeah, a number of the articles, and the boards that were invited were because we're pursuing capital projects that would affect many of these. We've got land acquisitions that would affect them, and so we were looking to have those folks that are affected to come here and make sure we were all on the same page.
Fantastic, let's do it. All right. I'm going to go through again and just raise your hand if you have a comment. Bills of prior years, I don't think we have any as of date, so that's an easy one.
Maybe start with 5, no?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Capital projects.
Yeah. Okay, capital projects, again, Keith listed them off. We've got public safety communications for chiefs at fire, 50,000. 3 comprehensive needs assessment, 1 for recreational fields, 2 for government building space needs, and 3 for the Littleton Common Sewer Strategic Plan. Any comments, questions?
Just one question. Is that with the library where it's at, or with the library outside, or both?
It's a needs assessment, just based on what we have now. So as a result of some of the conversations that came up from the library planning and site selection, and the opportunity potentially to repurpose the current space, it was thought that let's take a look and do an assessment of what everybody needs. Kind of the same, the kind of wish we had need to have.
What happens if you
have,
move out, what happens if you stay there, you know? all of that
Or,
stuff.
yeah, exactly. So what needs does everybody have? You know, perhaps the school department wants to be on a school property, well, this is school property.
Selectmen want to be on it.
So just to get a better understanding from each department, what their needs are.
The whole third floor.
And everybody affected will be invited to participate.
So the library already has completed their needs assessment, so I'm not sure where we fall in that. That's why I was asking. Right? We did a needs
Cause
assessment
or
as part of.
There's a number of other entities here that are affected by that. So
I
that's-
understand
This is
that.
kind of like the,
I'm just asking for clarification,
Yeah.
that's all.
We're not looking to reinvent information that already exists, but we are looking to have some way to synthesize all the information that's coming in. The COA had a major needs assessment done. We don't need to redo that,
Park
but
and
we need
Rec.
to translate it into how that,
Put all the pieces
what that
together.
means for office space.
Sir, name and address, please.
Bob Stetson, I'm from the Council on Aging. I just want to make sure that we understand that if we bring in this consultant to do a needs assessment, that they don't do what they did last time, which is basically look at what we have and say, this is how we can split it up. The purpose of this, I hope, is going to be to very carefully look at all of the departments in town and see what their actual needs are and what their reality of their work is, and then make some decisions in terms of how that can be met within the resources of the town. And that's a vast difference from what they did last time.
that's the plan, so hold us to it and stay involved.
And that is a scope that is, the PMBC was actually tasked with it by the town administrator last week to do just that.
Very good. Any other comments? All right, next one is fire station facility expansion construction, including authorization to rent temporary fire headquarters, estimated $8.87 million. Comments? Questions?
What do you want to know about the fire department?
Joe, just if anyone has any comments or questions.
No, Joe, we're not looking for that. It's relative to the article. We're not looking for an update. We're just relative to the article, if there's anything that anybody has questions on.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're right on schedule.
Alumni field renovation construction, estimated $2.35 million. Other than
And we'll have
the,
a better number within a few weeks,
Hopefully by the end of next week.
I couldn't
next
even-
week.
and next week.
You want to know what's-
All right.
you want to know what's happening?
With what?
I don't know.
No, Joe, the only question is, when will there be a number relative to Alumni Field?
Probably not till November sometime.
Oh.
Because we just awarded the contract last week, and we're waiting for proposal. We haven't negotiated a contract yet.
So what
I
is
won't know
that?
till next week.
So next week.
Okay.
So we won't
Sounds
know
like we
until
will-
next week
Yeah.
when we'll have a number.
That's right.
Oh.
Just told him that.
I didn't understand it that way.
I know, I heard the number, but,
Well,
Okay.
well, we need a
Next
number
week-
before we close the warrant, in any event.
next week we will know when we will know a cost, when the cost.
Next week we'll know when we'll know the cost.
We'll have a schedule next week.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
So if the schedule says you don't have a meaningful cost until after town meeting, does that say that this is a May special town meeting article?
Cross that bridge when it
Which
comes
is
to
the
it, right?
normal way we do it. I mean, I know there's an awful lot of people working awfully hard to try to drive this train down the track, but if we don't have meaningful numbers to go to town meeting, it should be a special article in May, not a fictitious number. in-
Hope we don't have to go there, but that we were aware we might.
So, I mean, I think we have a process that we follow, and we
Yep.
should follow it, that's all. And if we have a number, great. If it's ready to go in November, let's rock and roll. but
Joe, we're
it's
gonna have a
not.
number, aren't we?
You'll have a schematic
Yeah.
design number.
All right. Actually,
All right. Okay, rescind unused borrowing authority, basically, don't use something.
That's a procedural
Yeah, that's
one.
easy,
Yeah,
okay.
housekeeping.
Blended Community Preservation Act supplemental appropriations. Any comments on that one? I think we don't, that's a question mark,
I
right?
think we'd be okay to wait for the spring on that if we just promise not to spend any of the funding sources between now and then. But they need to be there when we.
we need it right now.
Okay, Mill Pond Restoration Feasibility Study, supplemental funding, $19,500 from Spectacle Pond Cell Tower Clean Lakes Fund. So that's how it's funded. Anything?
That's supported by the Clean Lakes.
Supported by Clean Lakes. Very good. Acquire Stensham property for Mill Pond Restoration Project. That was the one we were debating because it's marked as a donation, but it sounds like we just have to confirm that.
We'll
Town
see if
council.
it's, town council can inform us whether this is ready to go.
Comments on that one? Okay. Acquire 34 Cedar Road for Littleton Water Department. It's near the water tower. All right. Acquire surplus Mass DOT property for conservation purposes, Boxborough Road, 5.3 acres at $205,000.
On this one, the Mass DOT was had declared it surplus and was going to auction it off. And when the town expressed its interest in being able to buy it, and with the knowledge that we couldn't do that until our next town meeting in November, Mass DOT has stopped the auction process. They will wait for us to acquire it, and if we don't, then they will auction it. So, and it's being offered at its appraised value of $205,000.
Snapped it up, did we?
Excuse me, who will be the sponsor for this, Keith?
Board of Selectmen and the Community Preservation Committee and the Conservation Commission.
Well, the CPC is basically the bank on this.
Yeah.
Selectmen, I guess, will own it, or will the Conservation?
No, it'd be Conservation Commission.
Well, the Conservation, man, so what are they gonna do with it?
They're gonna conserve it.
There you go, okay. There should be a meeting.
Was that a trick question?
There should be a meaningful presentation at town meeting, not just a three-line article.
At the Selectmen's next meeting, they'll be updated on negotiations for P&S agreement on the other property, on the Joyce Williams property across from Foxborough Road, so we will have further information available then.
Because they're right across from each other.
But again, we're gonna be asking the townspeople to spend $1 million plus or minus. Should be some meaningful thought presented on what the property's gonna be used for.
Sure, yeah, we put that all into our grant application that we submitted to the state's Department of Conservation Services. We submitted a so-called land grant application, the local acquisitions for natural diversity grant program, requesting $400,000 for this, towards the $1.1 million acquisition. And there's a voluminous information that was put together for that report, which was shared as part of the public presentation. We had done so back in July, but we're happy to update everyone on it. We won't know by the time of town meeting whether we've been awarded the grant, though. But the vote of town meeting is contingent upon the grant. So worst case, from the seller standpoint, if we get a town meeting vote authorizing the acquisition of the Williams property, but we don't get the grant, then there's nothing, then we're not authorized to acquire it and would have to go back to a further town meeting for the full amount.
Okay, so we get the presentations teed up for next meeting then, on the purposes of that. Okay, good. Town Hall, Middle School, Russell Street, parcel care, custody, control. That's what we all talked about at the beginning of the meeting between Selectmen and School Committee? Any more comments on that one? Cool. Restrict development for tax title properties on Narcissus Road, 4 lots. Okay, getting towards it.
Mention of that since I live next door.
Sorry?
What is it actually asking for?
The proposal is to authorize the selectmen to sell those 4 tax title properties with the deed restriction that they not be developed. And that exceeds what our authority is right now, because they're tax title properties, or 2 of them are larger than our budget program. And under the tax title law, all we can do is auction them and not restrict the ability to develop them. We'd like to auction all 4 of them to get, together, but to restrict development.
Okay. Getting towards the end, town bylaw amendments, town administrator, Department of Finance and Budget, and this is about appointing authorization.
And this is if you were going to proceed with a reorganization plan. It's twofold. Part of it is funding, but the other part is that you need to amend the general bylaws. So there's a discussion and a policy decision to be made, whether to proceed with that now or at some point in the future.
Okay, and we have part of that discussion a little later. Okay. All right, and lastly, establish OPEB, Other Post-Employment Benefits Liability Trust Fund, and that's per the Municipal Modernization Act, so complying. All right, that's what, we had one we crossed off at the end there, so.
We had, at our meeting on, is Tim's still here, at our meeting on last Wednesday night, we had petitioners, I guess potential petitioners that came here with ideas for articles, and one of the ones that we had promised the feedback on was a proposal to require a ballot and checklist on, I sent you the draft.
You did, yes.
Which would require a ballot and checklist be taken on any proposed appropriation above
250.
some, 250,000. If, was it 6 voters?
6 people
stood and asked for the vote. And I was unclear whether I have to say, I didn't look up whether we had bylaws that govern that, or whether it's from my recollection is if you don't have a town bylaw that governs how a town meeting functions, then it's each town meeting that adopts its own rules, if you will, of what happens. We had taken the step, you may recall that a few years ago we accepted the statute that allows the moderator to determine whether a 2/3 vote is met without having to do a count. You can declare that the 2/3 vote has been met, but only because we accepted the statute that says that you can. And short of that, each town meeting can go to authorize the town moderator to make that determination. And it seemed like this one may be in the same category, that if there's not a bylaw that the voters adopt that says how every town meeting works, then each town meeting has the ability to adopt its own rule. But I think we were looking for some kind of, I know the petitioner was looking for some kind of feedback from the moderator and the clerk on that proposal.
Well, my suggestion, actually, if the board would agree, is that with this petition, and I think there might be 1 or 2 other citizens' petitions that are floating around out there, if the board would authorize town council to review the petitioner's language for legal form. I'm not suggesting that council write the articles for the petitioners, but for example, the one you sent me, I see some potential problems with that language, and before the petitioners go out and get 100 signatures on some language that doesn't do what they think it does, I'd like, if the board would agree, for council to save them the trouble and perfect the language, if you will, rather than write the article for them, just in the interest of fairness. You know, I'd hate to see, you know, the rug get pulled out from under petitioners because they didn't say the magic words at town meeting, so.
And with respect to the other articles that one of the other ones was to have a town meeting vote to establish a requirement that certain appropriations over $1 million would be subject to a ballot question at an election. And I think that we were successful in communicating that a town meeting cannot do that, for, among other reasons, because the state constitution doesn't grant cities and towns the authority to regulate elections. So no can do unless either there's a state law that's passed, and we use the example that if we had a representative town meeting, there's a state law that allows petitioners, 3% of the registered voters within 7 days can petition to overturn a vote of a representative town meeting. We have an open town meeting that's not open to us. And the only other way to have that kind of a referendum procedure is if a town has adopted a charter. And we have not adopted a charter in Littleton, so that is also not available to us.
So at this point, do we think that the petitioners will actually submit them? Because we had a good conversation, we don't know. We had a good conversation.
I didn't get any, I have no
Follow-up
response from any of the petitioners following that meeting to know whether they're
I have no
going to
problem
proceed.
authorizing council to review the three of them and, you know, not to, as Tim said, not to write them for them, but to offer commentary on each one of them that might prevent them from making a mistake that would, they would not find out about until after town meeting or at town meeting.
I mean, if they pursue it, I tend to agree. Any other?
I agree.
Yeah. Any other points, Tim, from your side?
Thanks.
No, just that review would have to happen sooner rather than later.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
If they show up in 2 weeks' time with 100 signatures and the language is not what it ought to be, then we're kind of stuck with that language. You can't take it back.
So we kind of have to communicate with them.
If there's a petition out there with one signature on it, then it's too late, because we're not allowed to amend the petition after it's been signed.
Right.
So.
But you can communicate, Keith, to the three people just to let them know what we're.
Yep, I will let them know that we're having council review it. and he
Well,
will
isn't
do
the
so
first
promptly.
question, did they even want to
Yeah,
pursue where they were headed? And then if so, then.
If they're gonna go forward, we will offer
Yeah.
that service.
Okay, very good. That was all the warrants we had. Any other, yes?
So the list I had question 2, which was FY17 budget adjustments, which I think you skipped. You said FY16 prior year bills.
We just went right to the capital because
Yeah, you did.
they were on procedural.
FY 2017 budget adjustments is an article.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, the school committee has one request, I think Mike might have communicated it to you, which is the
Oh, yes.
net school aid went up since town meeting.
So was that 59?
52.
52,000, yeah, want to give us an update.
Yeah, and we just
And
wanted
you'd like to-
I'm requesting that be added back into our budget so that we can relieve some of the pressure against our school choice spending.
I think Fred had a good question on that one. I can bring it up and maybe you could put it in your own words, but I wanted to kind of hear the answer back to that one. But Fred, would you mind reiterating? I can pull up your email here. Or I don't know if it's something we should just sort of, I saw it come through this afternoon, but there was an open question. I wanted to kind of see what the answer to that was.
I might not have the answer to it tonight,
Okay,
so.
yeah. Okay, on our radar though, then this school committee has asked for that.
Just so everyone knows, the question was, is it incremental spending or is it offsetting reserves?
The plan is to use it to offset I can answer in generalities.
That's fine.
We
That was my question.
budgeted so much to use out of school choice, we would just use this to not spend as much out of school choice.
That's fine, so.
That's the right answer, too. but-
Yeah.
But
Kind of
that's
need the
where
rest
my
of that
concern
money. Okay, all right. I don't know if there's something we need to do about that now, but it doesn't seem like we have a problem with
I just
that.
wanted to formally put it
Thank
up,
you.
you know, I know
It would be helpful
give you
if
an
the
email.
if the school committee could so vote. I think
All right.
I think we probably want to include that in the
So I'll bring it up Thursday, and I'll have, we'll vote and have a memo sent to you requesting that.
Thank you.
Let's give it a try. Yes, name and address, please.
Nancy runs, and I live in Air now, but I used to live here. I'm just asking, is it public input time?
No,
Not quite yet.
we're,
Okay.
sorry, we're running behind here, but we're getting close, very, very close.
Just thought I would ask.
Very close. Okay, any other articles or questions on the articles from the boards and committees? We're gonna have an awesome town meeting. All right, very good, then that is the end of agenda item number 2. All right, fantastic. Thank you all very much for coming down here and,
We'll see many of you next,
yeah.
at our next meeting. 2 weeks.
All right, we're just gonna take one other quick agenda item here out of schedule, which is Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizza. So if you got, hi, faces I don't recognize, it should be you.
I recognize them.
Really? You've been down there probably, I guess.
At lunch.
Ah,
Roast beef sandwich, I would.
Yeah.
hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Saving the controversial things for towards the end, I appreciate that.
Sorry.
I missed my own, I'm a city councilor, and I missed my own meeting tonight. I'm like, all right, I feel just at home, this is perfect. So we fight a little bit more, but,
That's the two guys that are here. It's a lot smoother when these guys are going.
we fight a lot more between ourselves. My name is Joe Devlin. I'm an attorney from the Devlin Law Offices. I have offices in Boston and Newburyport. With me is Eric Bush. I represent Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizza of Littleton LLC. I'm here for a change of manager. Mr. Bush has been working at the location. He's also been in the restaurant industry in progressive positions since 1994. He's 43 years old. He's tip certified. I've actually met Eric before at one of his prior restaurants where he was manager of record and went through this process in Burlington, and
yeah.
where he was approved as a manager of record, so he has been approved before. He was also approved for another location in Peabody, Massachusetts, a number of years ago, so he's been a manager of record a couple of times. He lives in Melrose with his wife and his 5-year-old daughter, and he's just been extolling the virtues of Littleton and really enjoys this location and enjoys this town, so he's looking forward to being here for a while.
Ordering up is always nice. Okay, so why the change in manager?
The restaurants are growing, so one restaurant or one manager goes to another restaurant. I requested to be in Littleton versus being towards Reading. I have family out Route 2, all the way down to Orange, and it's a little bit of a travel for me to come to work, but they'll at least visit me this way versus driving to the city. So.
Company's opening additional restaurants, and they're using, frankly, it seems like using training managers. The first manager is usually Brett D'Amato, who is the area director, and he comes in and opens up the place. They put another manager in, and just in this case, they said, one of the staff members is just said, I wouldn't mind going and being the general manager of the Reading location. So that's Stephen Barter, and they've got Eric here. Plenty of experience, and he wants to stay here, so.
It's much easier to commute to Reading from Melrose.
Yeah. A lot of thinking time, man.
Tell me about it.
You've done your research and all good. Getting A-okay. Okay, guys, any questions?
Yeah, happy to approve it. Glad you're here.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Good, all right, ready for a motion?
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the application of Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizza of Littleton LLC, DBA Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizza for 201 Constitution Avenue. The point for a change of manager from Stephen Barter to Eric Bush for its all-alcoholic restaurant license, Mass General Law, under Mass General Law, Chapter 138, subsection 12.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you.
Good luck,
Thanks
thanks.
very much.
See you.
Okay, you'll be in touch. Okay.
Don't be afraid of gluten-free options.
You and Lynn?
All right.
I've been trying to figure out the vegan options.
There we go.
We all have our trials and tribulations.
He's confusing. My twin brother, huh?
All right.
You can use that excuse.
Okay, now we are at public input. Item number 4. Public input, just missed it.
Nancy left.
Just missed it. Members' inputs. Selectman DeGost.
The only thing I wanted to put out there was, got an email, I think it was yesterday, from the MMA, the Mass Municipal Association, looking for nominees for the Pickard Municipal Innovation Awards. And I think some of what we do in this community are pretty innovative, some of the practices that we offer. So I just kind of challenge the department heads, the town administrator, to kind of take a look at that. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with a huge
It's only the
financial award, it's
recognition.
more
Now,
accolades.
The last 2 years, we'd submitted Crosstown Connect and didn't get it, so we only got a national award, not a state award.
That's okay, we'll take the national ones.
I was thinking of
Um,
the CPA, the blended CPA fund might.
That was innovative, very innovative.
Just, as you were talking about that earlier today, that came to mind.
I've already written that one in my head. In fact, I
do it.
started writing a grant.
And so those are presented at the trade show, at the MMA meeting, the annual MMA meeting, and
January.
I talk about collaboration all the time, and I think that no better idea than a stolen idea, right? Right. Someone else is already doing it.
I think it'd be great, and they need a third MMA award.
Yeah, you get that open
Already got
space on the
2.
wall.
Yeah.
So that's all I really wanted to add, is just gonna, challenge the TA and the department heads to.
Definitely. We love awards. Very good.
I don't have any member updates, but I'm ready to give 2 brief selectmen goal updates just to make it.
Well, A+ to you.
It's no work on my part, other than, on one end, a phone call to Bonnie. Chuck and I need to convene the group of affected parties for the comprehensive field study, but I did ask Bonnie, and she's already got some thoughts, I guess, that you're gonna share with us soon on some of the financial impacts so that we can structure this properly in the budget and answer the accountability issues, but we need to sit down with you and discuss that. Secondarily, on the sewer study, James Kennedy did take up our charge to him last week to kind of take the lead in building a public support network. So I know he's trying to organize a meeting next week. James is head of the Littleton Business Association, to identify and bring together people supportive of the goal of having sewer in the common area.
Very good, thank you. Both very timely as we come up on town meeting as well.
Did he have a date yet for that?
Yeah, I think it's the 21st.
Okay. I'll check with him and I'll
where,
post that information.
Okay, very good, thank you, Mr. Labey. My updates, I was gonna do a little bit of a formal champion, a selectman goal update on master plan. I have a nice slide, but we're way past, and I'd like Jim and Joe to be here as well, so I'm gonna do that next time. You did hear at the beginning, the charrettes are September 30th and October 1st, so everyone mark your calendars for sure. And then my most important update last Thursday was my mother's 60th birthday, so happy birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday, Mom.
Yes. All right.
How old?
60. Yeah.
That's old.
The 65th anniversary.
How old your brother be?
Yeah, my brother would be 60, 2 minutes before me.
How old your brother?
Although he's in Pacific time.
Yeah, so you'll.
I'll be
Technically.
2 hours and 58 minutes ahead of him.
There you go.
There you go. I can tell he's enjoying that one already.
A little punch drunk.
Okay, next up, item 6, Mission, Massachusetts. So, hey guys, come on down.
Thanks for your patience, guys.
Yeah, thanks for your
Thank you.
patience.
Thanks for having us in.
All right.
All right.
And you guys can sit anywhere you like in the front
Okay.
row, doesn't matter. Make yourself comfortable.
I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Andrew Toot. I'm CEO of Mission, Massachusetts, and I have my management team here with me. Corey Ravelson, who is our Director of Cultivation. John Penders from the Windmill Group, who is our Head of Security, and my Chief Operating Officer, Ben Smith, are here with us. And the reason we're here is we're interested in purchasing a plot of land at 245 Foster Street, over at the corner of 495 and Route 2. It's a 30-acre parcel that the Nordblum Development Company currently owns. And our intended and hoped use is to put 2 marijuana cultivation facilities there. We are, Keith, do you want me to spend a couple minutes going through?
Yeah,
I want to be
that's
efficient with
fine.
everyone's
Yeah, I was
time.
just gonna wave the wand and hope that that screen went on, but it doesn't, so it's on here.
Okay.
If you'd like to advance that, that one is forward.
Okay.
And that one is backwards.
Okay.
And even, maybe even before you go forward, Mr. Toot, either Keith or Madam Chair, I know that you and
Yeah.
Selectman DeCoste had a chance to meet with these folks, but since this is the first time we're dealing with an application here, it might be useful for the public to remind them of what was adopted by the
History.
town in terms of
Yeah, good idea.
zoning and, what the process is, just,
I could give a quick run through on that, the town meeting in 2014 established the medical marijuana zoning bylaw. That prior to that, we had a moratorium in place, and we understood that we would need to select locations in town that are in which the use was legal, or else the way the state law works, that if you don't allow for it in one location, then it would be allowed anywhere. So through a very involved planning effort, the planning board identified those locations where you could, where the use would be allowed. And had selected from, as I recall, the industrial, essentially the industrial zones, with the provision that certain uses, or that there could be a restriction within X feet of certain uses, like if it's near a school or other locations. At the end of the day, when we look at this site, we end up having, we've been approached by 2 entities that are pursuing the state licenses through the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. You need a state license in order to operate it. But you then need to comply with the local zoning, which in our case is a special permit issued by the planning board for an RMD, registered marijuana dispensary facility. An RMD includes either dispensary or cultivation site. In this case, the proposal is for a cultivation site. And the location that's being proposed by both this entity that we're meeting with tonight and another entity that we'll meet with 2 weeks from tonight is on either side of the Littleton MBTA commuter rail station. And tonight, the proposed location is the Nordblum property. We're going to get the Egg Rock property at the next site, and the commuter rail is in between. Ironically, perhaps, we're advised by council or reminded by council that under our zoning bylaw, the planning board can only issue 1 RMD permit within town, 1. So when it comes to it, when a proposal reaches the planning board for special permit, that they are only able to issue 1. Under the state procedures for the Mass Department of Public Health, the state licensing procedure requires that the local Board of Selectmen, in the case of a town, indicate either they're a letter of support or non-opposition for a proposed siting of either a dispensary or a cultivation site. Where support is expressed, it's often expressed in terms of a written agreement between the entity and the Board of Selectmen, a host community agreement and we have been provided with some sample agreements from elsewhere. But And so, and those agreements typically would indicate what financial benefits accrue to the town as a result of being the host. There is no limit, town council says, on the number of letters of support or non-opposition that the Board of Selectmen can give to entities who would then take them to the state licensing authority. It's just that, and frankly, you need not pick between the folks that we're meeting tonight and the folks that we'll see 2 weeks from tonight. However, the ability to pick would ultimately come to the planning board if both of the entities were to survive the state licensing process and get all the way through that, get their state license, and then need the local permit. So when all is said and done, the Board of Selectmen doesn't need to choose between the two if you don't want to. That if you met two groups and you thought that they both were accomplishing what the voters set out to do in the zoning bylaw, that the site plan was good, and that that the location was good, and all the things that we might be concerned about were addressed, then you can, then we could negotiate a host community agreement with each of the entities, and with the knowledge that ultimately, under our zoning bylaw as it currently exists, the planning board can only give one approval. So
Does the statute speak to who would negotiate the host community agreement? I mean, if the planning
the
board...
statute doesn't speak to a host community agreement.
Okay. But it's referenced here in our memo.
Yes, but not because the statute says so. That the practice has been for those communities that have
I'm just trying to hash out in advance whether the planning board would undertake that, whether we would, or jointly.
I think it would be a financial agreement. It would be the site issues are going to be decided by the planning board through the special permit process, and that the other issues mitigation or whatever would come through a discussion with the Board of Selectmen. No reason,
We should have that conversation with them.
we should have a conversation with them. I was going to say no reason why we couldn't include them, but then I thought one reason might be because they're ultimately going to be deciding on a special permit, and they ought not to involve themselves in it before that. So there is a reason why.
Okay.
They shouldn't, and we should. So you're in the right place tonight, so.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. So I want to be as efficient as and answer the questions that you all want to hear. Do you want to hear a few minutes of background on Mission, Massachusetts, and then get into the site-specific stuff? And we have John here to address security.
I think
It's
that's
your
important,
time.
not just for us, but for
Okay.
everybody
Sure.
at home and
Watching
everybody
on-
in
yeah.
the
Sure.
room.
Absolutely. Okay.
So we are Mission, Massachusetts, and our roots. I'm Andrew Toot. I'm CEO of Mission, Massachusetts, and Mission Partners. And our parent company, Forefront, the parent company, Mission Partners, started about a little under 6 years ago as the preeminent consulting company in the business. And, Forefront started with the mission of really trying to professionalize medical marijuana. As this has become legal across the country, people have applied for licenses and really didn't have a lot of guidance on how to run a very professional operation. And so Forefront has a consulting business which not only guides folks through,
That's all good.
guides folks through.
Security guy didn't even move.
Yeah.
He has that stuff all the time.
So Forefront has a business that was preeminently a consulting business that not only guided folks through the regulatory application process, but then helped them set up in the most professional manner and had policies and procedures in place to help them run a professional operation. In the last 2 years, we started a division called Mission Partners, which is, taking a more operational role in these licenses that we pursue. And, I'm heading up that organization, and here in Massachusetts, we're applying for 3 licenses. Massachusetts is what they call a vertically integrated state, which means that you have to grow and produce the vast majority of all that you sell. And so if you have a dispensary, there's no in the early days especially, there's not going to be a wholesale market for medical marijuana. You have to grow and produce the majority of it. And so, every applying entity can have up to can apply for up to 3 licenses. So Mission, Massachusetts currently has a letter to operate in Worcester. We have a letter of approval to operate in Burlington, and we are hopefully, we're currently in the process with Somerville, which is a competitive process. So when we started Mission, Massachusetts, one of the things that we wanted to address, in this vein of having the most professional operation out there, we looked around and tried to identify who the most professional consultant or security partner could be. And Windmill was, the very top of the list. Their roots are in Homeland Security. I'll let John speak for a couple minutes at the end here about how they go about securing a premises, but their credentials are impeccable. Windmill Group, based out of DC and in Bedford, has done security for Republican National Conventions, the G8 Summit, Major League All-Star Games, those types of things. Forefront Ventures started in 2011. East Coast office is here in Boston. All of us here are Massachusetts residents. You know where to find us. We have 38, we have secured 38 licenses across the country in multiple jurisdictions. Again, we are here. Our primary focus is on running the most professional operations out there, and we think we've assembled a very unique team to accomplish that goal. Quick bios of everyone here. Just like to point out, that everyone is local. There certainly, is a carpetbagging element to this industry where, folks will come in and they go, I want a license, I want to get into your community, and then have nothing to do with the community. We're all Mass residents. And quickly on the board, John Budd is a board member. John Budd used to be chairman of Harvard Pilgrim's board. Guy Maytal, who's an MGH psychiatrist, Harvard-trained psychiatrist. Very, very professional group. Some of the core values about patient care, transparency, being dedicated to the communities in which we serve, and being a good neighbor, which we take very seriously. This is all about operations, doing things professionally like you would do in any other business, and having those policies, procedures, protocols to really drive professional things on the professional operation on the back end, and do an excellent job with patient care on the front end. The Littleton facility. This is a snapshot of where we're talking about. It's right at the corner of Route 2 and 495, and this is a 30-acre parcel owned by Nordblom Development. They sent a letter to the town planner today, Keith, that...
Yeah, I saw an email.
You did, okay, good. They are in support of our project and are willing to be supportive in any way and vouch for how our negotiations are going and so forth. These will be purely grow facilities. We already have a small indoor facility in Worcester, so there will not be patients going in and out of here. This will be growth and production. We think that each facility will bring about 20 to 25 jobs, and will produce on the order of 1,200 pounds of product a year.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Back to the site map, are you purchasing or proposing to purchase the entirety of the Nordblom property or just a portion of it?
The entirety.
And do you have any further development envisioned for the rest of the site, or is that kind of buffer?
We don't. The site is currently planned or currently zoned for...
According to Nordblom, it's permitted for 100,000 square feet of
of building. So, there's not a lot more that we could do with the site, but we don't, that's just according to them right now. But whether that has to do with just what's buildable, what's not, that's what, I guess it has been permitted for in the past, so.
We would, the idea would be that we would put these grow facilities up. These are essentially buildings with glass roofs. Ben and I were recently out at UMass looking at, talking with some agricultural folks out there. This is a pretty good rendition of what it probably would look like.
Do you have height and length and, 50,000 square feet, we can kind of figure that out, but
Yeah.
as far as, are you 40 feet tall
No,
or?
they're like 18 feet tall.
Okay.
The average width is gonna be 42 wide, and they'll run them in rows. So 42 wide, about 100 feet long, and then the other house is kinda, so the site kind of.
So you get as much
lays
sun in
into the
there as you
hill,
can.
'cause you have a slight gradient there, so, they'll run north-south, so the sun will pass over
get
east-west. So the way the tracks kind of run, that's kind of why we picked that back corner.
Yeah.
Whereas works in the site, and we'll be able to site them, so they'll be aesthetically pleasing and try to minimize the impact of actually seeing them.
Do you use growing lamps in there as well, or?
There will be supplemental lighting.
I assume you have some sort of way of preventing that from creating, light dispersal in the neighborhood, or?
And there's light deprivation curtains we put on the inside.
Yeah.
So both to block the sun when it gets too intense.
Right.
And also the light going out.
Yeah, I'm just
We
thinking.
can totally black them out if we want to.
Well, for residential neighbors, you might have that it isn't a big glowing building.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, there is light deprivation curtains to do that.
Do you want to talk for a few minutes on security?
Sure, yeah, happy to. John Penders, thanks for having me here with the team. As Andrew mentioned, we've partnered with Forefront and with Mission, Massachusetts, both here and with some other clients around Massachusetts. We currently support clients in this industry in Illinois and in Nevada as well. Our background, the firm background, our principals come from the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, DEA. I'm former military myself. And what we do typically is security consulting for federal, state, and local entities. We've done that for quite some time, and we've done commercial consulting as well. Having Massachusetts roots in an office here in 2013, 2014, when the first applicants for the original licenses for the RMDs in Massachusetts received them, some of them reached out to us to ask if we could provide security support. And I guess the way we could describe it is we've been very selective. We want to work in the industry, but only with the best, most responsible players and folks, and that's why we really enjoy working with Mission, Massachusetts, and we're looking forward to working in all these locations. What we do for a client in this scenario is we bring what we call a best practice approach of Department of Homeland Security, risk planning protocols, some from the Department of Defense, also from law enforcement, to conduct site surveys, risk mitigation, and security planning for a facility like this. We've done it quite a few places already, and I'd say that the bedrock of our approach is not to come in to any community, city, town, and as the Washington DC security consultants, they're going to say, here's how we do it, here's how it is. Everywhere we go, what we really want to do is collaborate with the community at large, stakeholders, and then specifically law enforcement and public safety, fire, EMS. So where we've done this very recently in Quincy, we've met time and time again with the chiefs down there, fire and police, and showed them the plans and modified plans, modified protocols for how the security operations work to make sure it's tailored to the community and to their needs. And we think that provides the best security planning for the community, for the operators, and for any staff, patients, if it's a dispensary, which this isn't, on site, and works to kind of balance, to make it a secure site, but not one that looks like it's some sort of fortress or Fort Knox. Folks we have on our staff have worked to design embassy security overseas, in places where you want security, but it doesn't need to look like a jail or something like that. So that's the approach we bring and kind of integrate into the broader picture of what Mission Massachusetts is doing here.
Very good.
We have a couple slides, we put a couple slides in here just to talk about their risk approach and their security approach. It's sort of a three-step collaborative process, but I think it probably makes sense just to, unless you guys want to drill down on security. But
We've had all that sent to us digitally anyway.
yeah, that's right, that's right. So, in the interest of time, and as John said, and I didn't mention at the beginning, really the bedrock of what we're trying to do is I hit on it by, pointing out that we're all locals, but, we really do try to, establish a partnership. We want to be members of this community. We're local here to do it, and active members of the business community as well.
So I'll ask you just a couple of general questions. Why Littleton?
We were looking for, we found a piece of land, first off, and that, seemed to work, and it was zoned correctly. And, it's where it's positioned on the two major thoroughfares is great for where our dispensaries are going to be, or where two of them are and where three of them are, hopefully. We wanted to, establish a presence with some greenhouse technology. We think that, the future of growing cannabis isn't going to be, growing it in a warehouse. You have a sun that comes out every day that you can grow plants under, and let's use it, and it's a lot more energy efficient. So we were looking for a place to do that, and the spot, frankly, is perfect.
I forgot my second question. Types of jobs. So this will create some job opportunities. What types of jobs will there be?
Well, we think that they're going to be in each facility.
So can I just interrupt? So you're talking two facilities, 20 to 25 employees in each facility?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And there were probably, the breakdown's probably 5 to 7 who were sort of, managerial overseers, because there will be 2 shifts in those 2 facilities. And, there's going to be a cultivation, and probably if you break it down, probably another 15 cultivation type people who are plant folks. Mm-hmm. And then probably another handful who are, more into the extraction and development of oils and so forth.
So kind of administrative, scientific, and
Yes.
agricultural.
Yeah, these aren't, it's a pretty good mix of folks, and what we've pointed out to people before, these aren't minimum wage jobs. These are $15 to $25 an hour jobs. That aren't, and those are sort of the more menial cultivation jobs are probably in that range, and then we're going to have management on staff as well.
Follow up to the extraction and scientific. So there's going to be facilities in here that are labs, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's a medical marijuana, so it falls under certain standards. Do you know what kind of class those do you have to be class 1000 clean room, or
No,
is it just, okay?
no, but
I don't know the exact name
Yeah, I
of the
don't know
class
the
or
exact-
whatnot, but for
right.
the processing facility, it does need to be in a certain class. There's, fire code and different things that need to be complied with. But the room it will be pretty small and controlled. And
For the extraction?
it's a pretty
Right.
small operation, because you
Right.
run things through an extraction machine that's as big as this
We're talking
table.
like, 1,000 square feet. So
That's all regulated by DPH.
That's
right.
regulated by DPH and,
And it's CO2 extraction. We've worked with some other clients who have these operational and done the security planning with the fire department and the public safety, and walked them through it, and there's no hazmat or hazardous chemicals to it. It's really a CO2. So the biggest speaking from the safety security side, that where we've seen this in the past, the fire department's only been concerned that in those processing labs, there be a CO2 alarm just to monitor the levels in the atmosphere. And so that's what we've seen, at least in other places.
So just to finish that thought,
Yeah.
there would be extraction and there would likely be a kitchen.
I kind of envisioned like a commercial kitchen.
Right.
And probably have the similar standards, you're not in white booties and white, it's not like CDC.
Hairnet.
It's pretty clean though.
Yeah.
It's clean,
Yeah,
it's not.
it's pretty clean.
Level without, yeah.
Okay.
And that'll happen in like the head house section, you see that second picture there, where it's not a glass house, it actually have solid walls and whatnot, any of the processing will happen in there, not in the glass sections of the house.
That's what the storage of the product would be.
Storage,
before.
the state mandated vaults,
Right.
all the processing, all will happen in that section.
It's very tightly regulated by DPH.
Yeah. Can
Just one more and then I'm done. So to that point, culinary, agriculture, science, administration.
Security.
Security.
Mechanical.
What's not there is sales. Again, just to reiterate and be very clear, this is not a storefront. There is no customers, there is no cash, there is no nothing like this. This is to,
None of that.
But there will be transportation from the facility to your dispensaries.
Correct.
There will.
But you're gonna be secure.
They will be, and they're regulated by DPH as well. So there's a full requirement that DPH has for that. We bring our own protocols as a security consultant, to advise on the client how to do that. And, in generalities, it's unmarked vehicles, lock boxes internal to the vehicle, 2 people, GPS tracking, logs, inventory on the way out, inventory on the way in, much like a bank transfer.
And the vehicles will be on the smaller side. We're not talking 18-wheelers,
You're rolling a box truck out of there
maybe a box truck or a
once or twice a
van.
day.
once or twice a
A
day.
Wells Fargo truck.
Yeah.
A Wells Fargo type. About that kind of size, okay.
Yeah, it's not, people sort of think, oh, well, this is a big facility, you're rolling 18-wheelers in and out, and you're just not.
So, actually, that goes to one of the other questions I had relative to, and it kind of falls up in the extraction. So you're gonna be doing extraction to make oils,
Infused products.
Infused
products, so brownies, cookies,
It's about half the
sops.
market is
Okay.
is infused products versus, flour, which is
Buds.
buds.
Yeah, okay. All right, so if you have the greenhouses, I've got a couple of questions around utilities. So water consumption, obviously you're trying to grow stuff, so water is important. Do you have any idea on consumption? You mentioned Quincy, that's a dispensary that you've done work at, but that's not something that Mission's involved with.
It's a cultivation facility too, but we only know the security side, not
Okay.
the water.
But do you guys have any idea on consumption for water from talking to some other folks, going to UMass? We've got our
Well,
own,
we could,
got our own water.
do you have a stat of that? We could certainly follow up. I don't want to just throw numbers out there.
Okay, that's fine.
But we could follow up and give you a very educated
Thousands
guess.
of gallons versus millions, with
Even a ballpark, just from a planning standpoint, because we have our own utilities, we have our own light, and we have our own water.
Yeah.
And the other question is about power.
Yeah.
Putting power into these buildings, Paul alluded to the ambient light. And, so how much consumption is there gonna be relative to electricity? Are these buildings able to accommodate the kind of amperage or, it's not my department, but just wanna get those questions out there.
Yep.
But, and then, do the greenhouses open up at all for, because if it gets too hot in there, lots of greenhouses have the roof slide or to get some.
Vent them on the top, you can kind of see these clamshell kind of vents. up
They are
top.
vented.
Because
Well,
the
they
heat
will
heat's
have
gonna
vents.
rise.
Yeah.
Okay.
So vent
So,
up.
is there any odor involved?
So, good question, so.
Any odor
on those
mitigation,
vents,
I guess is what I'm looking
There
at.
is an odor elimination product we will use on this, from a company called Fogco. It's actually invented for the poultry industry, for theirs, so when the air vents, there'll be a machine there that has a small, almost like the ones you have in like a bathroom, it kind of blasts, they give you
Ron.
15 seconds like that. So it's almost the same as like a Febreze, so it bonds with the odor and kind of nullifies it, it makes it drop back into the greenhouse. And it's
Attached to the molecules.
attached to the molecules, reverse reaction, and they fall, weights them down.
So to be completely transparent, we're either going to go that direction or we're going to use carbon filters, which are, industrial, a lot of industrial, commercial, large companies use these to mitigate smell on the way out in the HVAC system. So.
Talked about,
Back to your question,
employees.
even though they are greenhouses, we still will use a lot of power.
I anticipate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll get
It'll be
you,
greener than
we'll get you a good
most of
stab
our
at
competitors,
those.
but we'll still be using a good amount of power.
So I have no idea on code relative to, the fire chief and deputy chief are here. I have no idea what code would be for a greenhouse, pumping that much power in a glass structure which produces a lot of heat. I don't know, I'm just,
Get that way.
yeah, if you have any industry stuff that we can get, that we can dispense to, because they're gonna wanna know
Right.
if something were to happen, how to treat, and,
Yeah.
so a lot of those questions. And it kinda ties into security as well. You got anything?
I'd just be interested to see if the public safety chiefs or any of the residents here had any questions. I'm very, other than that, I may think of questions later. Maybe we can submit them through the chair or the administrator, and then probably wait off in any discussion until we've heard both presentations.
Yeah, that's a good point. We are unexpectedly missing two of our members tonight. We almost were missing 4 of our members, and then you just be dealing with me.
You almost had just one.
But,
She can handle it.
So, we'll ask them to watch, the replay and send the questions to myself and Keith, but while we're here now.
And I had meant to put this up at the beginning of the presentation, but just as a reminder to folks, this is a map of what the RMD overlay district is. The areas shown in green are those that are permitted by town meeting. The red areas are not part of the zoning bylaw specifically, but they are meant to show the distance from excluded uses as they existed in March of 2019, or 2014, when town meeting.
How was it?
Yeah.
You
So,
visited 2019.
I'm just back.
Have you guys
from-
been sampling products?
Just
Do we
back
need
from-
any overrides?
Just back from the town. No, it worked out well. And,
Don't spoil it.
How did
no,
we do?
okay, all right. Good. No, we did. We had to exclude all the debt, but other than that. So, since you asked, but so the particular location that is being looked at is in a permitted area, and it is not near an excluded use, so.
Meeting schools and
The
that
red
sort of
dots.
thing.
We haven't
churches,
built any
right.
schools or any other qualifying places in that.
I have just one more question. It's relative to security and really aesthetics. So it's not gonna look like Fort Knox, it's not gonna look like a prison. You have residences just beyond, so you're looking at this site right here. Obviously, we have the parking lot as part of, that's adjacent, but there's a lot of homes going in here, and there's a lot of homes going up this way, so it's a residential area. Do you anticipate having a gate at the road or setback, or, the topography kind of lends to you guys hiding it down where you're hiding it closest to 495, because it flows away down towards 495.
Right.
But,
Yeah,
it's kinda-
the nice thing about this site, and one of the earlier questions alluded to, is there's a lot of space. And from a security perspective, we always like a lot of space because sometimes when things get too crowded, you don't get the same level of security. So in this sense, one of the biggest principles we like to use in security planning, you've probably heard before, is defense in depth. So it's a layered security approach. So a site like this allows you to have some sort of fence and an access control point gate, but it doesn't need to be right up against the road and visible. There's enough room to have that access control and perimeter area, and then layer in security monitoring and intrusion detection on the facility. So I wouldn't anticipate that it would look like very much of anything from kind of a public perspective driving by, particularly where the plan is to locate those buildings.
Good question.
I think I'm good. Actually, the only,
The MBTA is looking at the potential to expand its parking, but it will not go beyond the limit, obviously, what the T-zone property is, but they're looking at just this highlighted area, just with my,
I see your hand.
talk to the hand.
Chiefs, Deputy Chief, Jim, any comments, questions, thoughts?
First off, Matt King, Chief of Police. First off, I was extremely pleased to hear about the window group. I've talked to some, I've done some research on your security firm, so top notch. I will say that the chiefs and I were just talking about some of the different groups that have come and approached us, and this group is the most professional I've seen and talked to, and I mean as a whole. Guess excited to move forward and keep the conversation moving. I don't see any real issues at this point.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Chief. Chief, Sam?
No issues.
Jim, comment?
Jim Klein, Highway Department. Do you have to use like natural gas to heat the place, or will it be through electricity?
Probably both.
Will you be looking at any solar part of that, where you have such a large parcel?
Yeah, we're gonna try to be as efficient as possible and as green as possible with this facility.
How about, most of the stuff will be inside, but machinery and noise?
It's not a lot of machinery or noise. That will, you know, I mean, we have like the CO2 extraction machine, but, yeah, other than that, there's not any other, you know, big machines going in and out. You know, there'll be a
HVAC chiller that might.
Right. I mean, there's HVAC noise, but not a lot else that I can think of.
Jimi Hendrix piping through. Maze.
Maybe a little music.
That's trying to have us to go there.
It goes with the territory.
But it's mostly handwork.
Do you need a lot of soil and stuff to get started inside, or is it?
So I think that we're going to be, we're not going to be using soil. We're going to be using a soilless cocoa mix, which, you know, we're just going to be buying, you know, pallets of and you know, loading that into the facility. We'll have a lot of it stored on site, but no soil, I don't think. It'll be a different medium.
I know you're way early on your thing. Have you done any engineering of the site to figure out how you're getting in there and like the soils and?
Meaning like
like where your entrance is going to be off the road?
The
Pretty
property owner's doing a lot of that work for us, so they've been looking at it for us as part of the sale. So I think there's only one access point across that bridge to get in.
Yeah.
So we can site the entrance wherever, if we have access to that access point over that bridge, you can kind of see, I don't know if Keith can put his hand over it, that.
Right there, yeah.
So as long as we can get there, we can site it sort of pleasing to the town or the planning board as far as where on that road they'd want it, or.
No direct access off 495.
Drive-through.
Although a lot of vehicles tend to stop there though, right, Chief? All over 495.
Abruptly.
Yes, stop there. Good. Okay. Public input. Okay. Any last comments you guys want to share with us?
I think we're good.
Very thoughtful
Okay.
proposal.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So we'll probably hear the other proposal. It's scheduled in 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
then do some discussion after that about
That's-
your requested letter of support, and that's what you're formally here
That's
looking
what
for.
they really want, yeah. And we would like to talk about host community agreement as well, and the
Is it something you
mutual.
want to get into at all, or the HCA, or not so much?
No.
Okay.
Respectfully.
Okay, so,
They'll take the letter.
all right, I'm just trying
Take a
to check.
one-page letter.
I think that's it. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Good luck.
Anyone have copies of the presentation?
Selectmen, we have.
We got it digitally, I believe,
Yeah.
right? I don't
Yes.
need a hard copy of that. Great, thank you.
If you leave some, though, I will, then when someone comes into my office and asks for one, I won't have to photocopy it, so. Yeah, so that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah.
These are for you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Who always need a football game?
All right, well, let's get you out of here. Let's get through these next ones. Boom, boom, boom.
No, we definitely do. That's a good point.
Okay. 4 items. See what we can get done, how fast we can do them. Selectmen's meeting schedule. So Keith and I were chatting about this. I know we don't have 2 of our board members here, and I know I personally, exactly.
So let's give them some responsibility.
That's a good point, actually. Don't we need to form a committee or something? I personally can't make October 3rd, but we kind of said, let's just vote to use these dates, and then we
Yeah,
can
then
negotiate
change it.
them later, yeah.
Right,
Is that good?
That works for me.
All right. I'm happy for
We don't need a
English.
vote on that day, I guess we don't.
Yeah, I need to vote on this.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to schedule the following Board of Selectmen's meetings for the dates indicated at 6:30 PM in Room 103 Shattuck Street Building unless otherwise noted. Monday, October 3rd and 17th, 2016, regular meetings. Monday, November 7th, 2016, regular meeting. Wednesday, November 16th, 2016, special meeting prior to town meeting, parenthetically.
Which would not be in room 103.
No.
Oh, yeah, right.
Monday, December 5th and 12th, 2016, regular meetings.
I'd say Town meeting at Littleton Middle School.
Yeah, Littleton Middle School, as amended. All right.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Done. All right, we have a meeting schedule, and Kirby, I am texting it to you now if you are out there.
He just reads the summary that'll be out. before I go
Tweeted
home.
and, yeah. LCTV needs to line up with any of our meeting dates, so we try to give them as much heads up as possible. Okay, next one, accept donations, estate of Eleanor Mary Cooper.
4 town agencies received notices of bequests, and under the Selectmen's gift policy, it requires your approval in order for them to accept them. So we're taking the initial step of authorizing those 4 agencies to sign the paperwork to allow the bequest to be processed.
I don't see any issue with that.
No, very, very nice of her.
Very great.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to authorize execution of assents and waivers of notice for relative to bequests from the estate of Eleanor Mary Cooper for the following town agencies: $10,000 for the Cemetery Commission, $5,000 for the Police Department, $5,000 for the Fire Department, and $10,000 for the Council on Aging. And further to vote pursuant to Master General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 53A, to deposit said sums in special gift funds, the proceeds of which shall be used without further appropriation by the respective agencies, subject to approval of the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So, yeah, like you said, very generous, wonderful, and congratulations to Cemetery, Police, Fire, and COA.
If anybody's preparing their wills,
Don't forget us.
Yeah,
Don't forget us.
spelled L-I-T-T.
Okay, that's done already. All right, 7C, Finance and Administration Succession Reorganization Plan. And again, on this one, is more of a discussion and an update rather than any sort of decision-making.
Madam Chair, since it's in front of us, I just want to say, obviously, this is something we probably should discuss when the full board is
Yeah,
here.
sure.
But I would add that one thing I had requested when we met on this before was, I know there's a updated version of the
You have the red line.
job description.
You have the
for-
red line version of it.
But I think it's appropriate in context to see, Keith, your, the town administrator's job description too, so that we can see
Sure.
what the overlap is or that sort of thing. The other point is just administratively, I know that Madam Chair, yourself and Selectman Carr had worked with Keith and Bonnie in proposing this, but subsequently, we also made assignments which gave myself and Joe Knox,
Yeah.
Selectman Knox, that portfolio, so maybe, maybe Joe and I can sit down with Bonnie and Keith and/or whatever, and get a little of the background to what you, so then Chuck will be the only guy in the dark here.
yeah, it's, that'll be good.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'd like to,
Doesn't take a
I'd like to,
Get the backstory.
get the backstory and act on our, you know, our charge there. I don't know if there's other things involved, but in any event, I think we probably best put this off.
I think that's,
I agree.
yeah,
Not for long,
good advice.
whatever.
Is there anything you
Why,
guys
okay with
wanted to
that?
highlight?
Well, just to call out that one of the, one amendment that we've made to the proposed job description for the assistant town administrator is to add and to highlight that position as being a grant writer. And frankly, I would view that as feedback from meetings that I've sat through here when we've discussed what capacity do we need to address issues the town is facing. And we had not specifically carved out this position for grant writing. Many of the applicants that you would, you know, the pool of applicants that were applied for such a job would have strong backgrounds as grant writers. And if that is something that the board wants to do, we're specifically talking about the Littleton Common Sewer Project a week ago, but there's many others. And if we don't do so bad right now in grant, but it's, like, you know, we don't have a grant writer, and usually if I line up a grant, I find someone to write it. I'm not writing grants, but we get a lot of grants from just being out there, and maybe we could get more if there was a focus, so. But we can put this on I think we'd need to have a discussion at the next meeting, 2 weeks from now, hopefully with the full board, so that if the, because it's after that date, you don't have the opportunity to bring this forward to November.
I get you. Yeah, so if you want to put it on another 2 weeks from now, fine.
Yeah.
But not guaranteeing I personally have my questions answered that quick.
There's this quick turnaround time. Okay, so
So we'll schedule this for August, listen to me, August. First, it was August 2019, how about that?
Yeah, 2019.
You know, I was on Netflix, I was watching, there was the last episode of Star Trek Next Generation, where it was taking place in 3 time periods. Check it out. I think I'm in the
I
future.
can't even handle this time period.
we've been in all sorts of different time periods
That's only
today.
because it was the
Where are we?
50th anniversary of Star Trek last week.
So Keith, you can do the first one, the town, your roles and responsibilities, send that over relatively quickly.
Yeah, I will put my job description in the packet.
All right.
Yeah, so you have it.
Okay. All right, and then
I
we
thought I
need
had put it in this week, but, because Bonnie got it for me, but I see that it is not here, so it will be in the next one.
If only we could fill that other position soon, so soon. Okay. All right, any other thoughts on that one then? All right, moving right along, we're so close. Confirmatory deed, 21 Laurel Road.
This is a matter that was brought to our attention from town council. He was contacted by the property owner's attorney. Apparently, there was a defect back in the 1960s, which needs to be cured so that the property owner is able to sell it, presumably. And that the way that would be accomplished is by the Board of Selectmen approving the confirmatory deed that town council has prepared.
Confirmatory deed, I noticed misspells Selectman Carr's name. If anybody knows anyone at the law firm of Echo Morgan and O'Connor, you might want to bring that to their attention.
I could even, yes, this is by pure coincidence. I have to know the attorney of record happens to be my spouse. And very briefly, I don't know the names of the folks involved, since there's a Chinese wall between the attorney and me in this particular case, but it appears that when the property was originally sold, it was sold inappropriately to a person who's dead, which is not possible.
That's not okay?
No, not generally.
Well, if the check clears.
Okay, moving along, so what's happened is that as a result of all this, the deed basically has to be, as it were, remedy corrected. So it goes to the wife of the deceased at the time. By conveying it to her, by the way, she's dead, okay? But it was conveyed to her when she was obviously still alive, all right? So it will be, it can be conveyed to her because the original conveyance was supposed to be when she was alive. So all this does is.
We have
make it
this
so.
all from town council.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's
Mike.
all.
By the way, name and address, sir.
Of whom?
Yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, 11 Loanne Street.
Michael Zeldin.
Imitating a lawyer tonight.
Playing the role.
We're about,
Very uncomfortable with
we're
that.
about to recite all the other names in the motion.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to provide a confirmatory deed to property located at 21 Laurel Road, which the town originally conveyed to Richard A. James and Helen F. James by two separate deeds dated August 13th, 1963 and July 17th, 1964. This confirmatory deed is being provided at the request of the current property owners to reflect the facts that Richard A. James had passed away before either of the conveyances and that the property was therefore conveyed to Helen F. James individually.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. There you go.
Things to sign.
Very good.
The
Minutes, do we
confirmatory
wait on
deed and
minutes to have the full board in case they wanted to
No.
look at them? No?
Well, you can wait, but.
All right, all right. PJ, you out there, you want to read the minutes first before we approve them?
I actually had, my final objection of the evening actually involves both of the minutes, and it's another issue. When we adopted the goals, we had a summary, which has now taken on life as the list of goals, and it's on the website as such, but the matrix has more detail to it, topics that we didn't talk about as much,
Oh,
but
that's
are
right.
included in deal there. So I'd like to see them reflected in both of these sets of minutes. It, appears on page, whatever it is. Well, it's in both sets of minutes, both the August 22nd and the,
Why don't we attach the matrix to the
Yeah,
minutes?
and
I mean, the
but it should be noted in the minutes too, because these goals are listed specifically as if that's, that's the sum of the content. So if there's a reference
Page
there,
4.
the attached matrix, is the full document or whatever. In each case, as long as the reference, I would amend then that the August 4th preliminary goal setting just state that, the below summary below is a summary of the full list of goals adopted in the matrix. How's that? And then we can similarly add that into the language on the August
Page
22nd
4,
minutes.
August 22nd.
Where the assignments are. And then, as you say, Keith attached the matrix. And as I say, that also appears on the website, and I'd like to see the fuller language there, because there's topics that just aren't mentioned there, and unless they're there,
I'll put the matrix up.
great, thank you.
Good call.
And with that, I would move approval of both sets of minutes as amended.
So Thursday, August 4th, 2016, and Monday, August 22nd, 2016?
Yes.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Look for one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much, everyone, especially for your patience, ran over, and to our selectmen here who came out when times were tough. So thank you.
No problem.
Flip the
Just talking
switch.
about you.